There was a deafening silence. Every living soul in the crowded arena was watching with bated breath. The third set was underway, and the last arrow remained. The commentator's loud voice pierced the silence, making the moment more exciting. He proudly announced to the audience the youngest participant in the championship. Young Yu Sang-hyun's every shot hit the target accurately. Will his decisive shot be as perfect as the previous ones? While the commentators warmed up the audience by mentioning the young man's past accomplishments, he, with hands sweating with excitement, squinting his eye, the young man carefully calculated the flight path of his arrow. There is a waiting silence again. Yu Sang-hyun released the bowstring and the arrow shrieked through the air. Along with the audience and commentators, watches with excitement as his arrow hits the target with precision. The arena was filled with the fans' joyous shouts and cheers for the inimitable archer. It was a beautiful moment of triumph. On that sunny day, the youngest champion of the national competition was born. Everything disappeared in front of Yu Sang-hyun and darkness fell. The joyous shouts of the arena were replaced by an indignant roar. The memories dissipated and Yu Sang-hyun found himself in the evil manager's office. While Yu Sang-hyun was picking up the documents his manager had thrown from the floor, he was thinking, why did he have to give up this archer with an injury that he had gotten on his goodwill? Another day was behind us. There were a number of houses in the rough neighborhood, but there was one particularly old and shabby little house. It was in it that night that Yu Sang-hyun sadly recalled the events of 10 years ago. Archery was everything to him, but this sport required a lot of money. Yu Sang-hyun lived with his grandmother, and the only way out was to get a scholarship. So he devoted himself fully to training. Year after year he kept shooting. He loved being a hopeful young man, because archery was his calling and his destiny. But suddenly a vivid memory surfaced in front of the young man, as if he were reliving it again. The cab, the terrible accident. And if the coach hadn't gotten him a job with that company, he could have been unemployed for life. Yu Sang-hyun decided to go to Tribe. It was a streaming app where you could find a lot of things, but fully immersive game broadcasts were at the peak of popularity. It is an advanced technology that allows you to feel yourself in the game world. To play the game, you need a special device, a capsule. An ordinary office worker like Yu Sang-hyun can't afford one of these because the capsule costs a fortune. But at least he could watch the streamers. He was grateful for that. Yu Sang-hyun turned on the streamer. A young man dressed as an archer was hiding behind a tree watching a boar. He has to take it down in 15 minutes for 100,000 won. The archer was confident, despite the disbelief of the spectators. But all 3 of his arrows missed the boar. This caused a flurry of negative comments, to which the archer himself responded with anger and sought justification in an old capsule. Yu Sang-hyun went into his thoughts. He was jealous because anything was possible in the game. He was willing to give up everything to gain universal recognition. Thinking sadly of the missed opportunities, the young man went to bed. Yu Sang-hyun walked into Manager Park's office with a resignation letter. According to Park, if he leaves now, the severance package will be decent. The employees here have been through a lot, both university and CV writing. Some even went abroad to study because English alone was not enough. But no one asked Yu Sang-hyun, and he didn't have much of a choice when he got there. The light was on in the window of Yu Sang-hyun's house. Yu Sang-hyun was lying across his bed, once again reminiscing about the memories of 10 years ago. He remembered his training, thought of himself as a young man, full of enthusiasm and strength, thought of his dreams and goals that he had never been able to realize and achieve. But now it's just a memory, he can't go back in time. He received a notification for the start of a new broadcast of Bubblegum, which Yu Sang-hyun often watched. It was as if it were a sign, an answer from the universe to his question about how to proceed. A crazy idea crept up on him. Many thoughts swirled in his head, one replacing the other. If everything was possible in the game, could he also shoot a bow? But the question was whether it would become popular. Yu Sang-hyun leafed through the app with 100. Among them were experienced and not so experienced. But the main thing was that the audience liked it. Yu Sang-hyun hesitated, because there are too many variables in our reality. School acquaintances, hometown friends, relatives, a whole host of unpredictable factors. But this world reminded him of the life he had dreamed of in his youth. A life of competition, of self-improvement, where you have to gradually climb higher and higher. It's a simple but fair world. With hands trembling with excitement, He slowly hovered his cursor over the Tribe app icon. Cafe Lala was very popular among the locals. It attracted people with its convenient location in the center and always fresh baked goods. Yu Sang-hyun was sitting at one of Lala's tables with one of his friends. Their table was attracting attention thanks to Yu Sang-hyun's friend, who couldn't contain his emotions after learning about his buddy's plans. Sang-hyun told him about his desire to purchase a full immersion capsule, nervously sipping his coke. The name of Yu Sang-hyun's friend took it as a very bad idea. After all, Sang-hyun had never played it. Kim Joo-hyuk asked when was the last time Sang-hyun held a bow in his hands. His friend was still talking, but Sang-hyun was calm. He was sure that everything would be fine. But how could he know if he hadn't even tried it? Sang-hyun looked at his friend and couldn't understand why Joo-hyuk was getting nervous. What was the problem? Sang-hyun thought back. In his previous job, where no one could be trusted, Kim Joo-hyuk was the only one who had earned his trust. But his life was the complete opposite of Sang-hyun's life if you compare them. He's the elite of the elite, a major from a rich family, on his way to success by leaps and bounds. Every time Sang-hyun talked to Joo-hyuk, he felt as if all the problems were evaporating. Kim Joo-hyuk clutched his head in despair. He suggested to his friend that he go to Kangwon Land, hoping it would help. Kangwon Land was an entertainment complex with casinos, hotels, restaurants, and rides. But Yu Sang-hyun dismissed the idea, saying that he was not good at pictures. Taking a deep and heavy breath, Joo-hyuk asked him how much one capsule cost. Cost 4,000 won. Joo-hyuk opened the search engine on his phone to find out more information. There were all sorts of extras needed, and there were electricity charges too. It was a surprise to Sang-hyun when he found out that he would need something else besides the capsule. The total was about 1,000,000 won. This made the young man quite upset. After finishing their drinks, the guys went outside. They stopped in the courtyard of the cafe. Joo-hyuk told his friend to wait there until he finished his business. A few hours later, they met again. Joo-hyuk led them in a direction without saying where. The two friends found themselves in front of a large building of 5 stories. Judging by the signs, it was a capsule rental. Joo-hyuk walked up the steps while Sang-hyun was completely unaware of what was going on. He was following him, but did he need a rental capsule? He wanted to buy a brand new one. A nice young man by name was coming out of the building. Joo-hyuk and Sang-hyun said hello to him. The young man smiled in a friendly manner and introduced himself. His name was Kang Suk-hyun. Smiling radiantly, he told the guys that he wanted to offer them the remaining capsule models at a reduced price, and invited them inside as well. It was only at that moment that Sang-hyun finally realized that Suk-hyun was the owner of the capsule rental. He wondered what else to expect from the elite, smiling to himself. When they went inside, Sang-hyun froze with surprise. There were only capsules everywhere. Kang Suk-hyun got a little too close to the young one, asking him if he should check the capsule before buying it. Sang-hyun hesitantly agreed. Suk-hyun led him to a separate office. Sang-hyun's biometrics were needed to use the capsule. Kang Suk-hyun returned to the hall where Kim Joo-hyuk was standing alone. The other didn't miss the opportunity to thank him for his help. But Kang Suk-hyun suddenly started discouraging Kim Joo-hyuk from buying the capsule. He said that there are too many people like Sang-hyun nowadays. They watch game streamers and get crazy. A lot of people think that they could show their talents to the fullest in the game, but in reality it wasn't like that at all. At least that's what Kang Suk-hyun said. Despite being completely immersive, is still vastly different from our usual reality. The person there does not use the physical body. When there are no physical limitations, logic and wisdom take a back seat. It is all about willpower. The game that Sang-hyun will immerse himself in is called Real Olympic. Considering his experience in archery, the owner customized it accordingly. After explaining everything he needs to know to you, Sang-hyun closes the capsule. Sang-hyun's body suddenly fell into nowhere. He was hovering in space while he was surrounded by various codes. They were everywhere you looked. It was very unusual. His body is there, but his mind seems to be drifting away. Yu Sang-hyun closes his eyes, squinting them hard, and when he opens them, a completely different world appears in front of him. He is in an arena filled with people. He is holding a bow, and he is wearing the very same uniform. It all seemed too real. How could it be possible? He looked bewildered at his hands, which held a bow for the first time in years. A loud voice was heard from all sides. It was the sports commentator announcing Sang Hyun's appearance on the field. Everything was down to the smallest detail. The young man felt as if he were really at the Olympics. The commentator announced the first arrow. Sang Hyun was overcome with doubt, but his hands automatically reached for the bowstring. But his hands trembled. The tension of the bowstring, the grip on the handle, it feels unreal. Sang Hyun is in a stance. His hands are no longer trembling. The arrow screeches through the air. He fired one arrow after another, each one hitting the bullseye. But something was wrong. Sang Hyun felt it, but he couldn't figure it out. The game was already over. He returned to reality where the two guys were waiting for him. Sang Hyun was strangely tired. His face burned with hot tears that ran down his cheeks, falling to the bottom of the capsule. Kang Suk-hyun approached Ju Hyuk with a question about who Sang Hyun used to be. The latter answered, he used to be the youngest gold medal winner, probably the best in the world. Until that unfortunate incident. Kim Ju Hyuk suddenly told the owner that he wanted to help Sang Hyun. He loves archery with all his heart. Sang Hyun's mind flashed back to Jae Hyuk's words. It hadn't been that long since he had been archery, so much so that he didn't even remember. How could Sang Hyun forget such a thing? He remembered every detail as if it had happened to him yesterday. That unfortunate incident, the cold, even indifferent stare of the doctor. A dream he had to give up. Sang Hyun covered his face with his hands, crying helplessly. Ju Hyuk tried to help him somehow, but Sang Hyuk asked him to stay back. He was uncomfortable. Ju Hyuk looked at him with concern. Still, he was the truest and best friend one could find. A few hours later, when Sang Hyun was already at home, he was trying to figure out the capsule. It was quite difficult. The capsule's connection was complete and the young man set the desired program. Sitting inside the capsule, he was as happy as a child with a new toy. It looked like it would be possible to start the broadcast today. With hands trembling with excitement and anticipation, he pressed the button to start the stream. The next step was the game. Sang Hyun had already chosen the game he was going to play. It's called Kingdom Age. The events of the game are set in the Middle Ages, and the story revolves around the life of a mercenary. The game is full of realistic and brutal combat at every turn. Maybe that's why it's not very popular. Kingdom Age is a well-known game, but because of its high difficulty, there aren't many streamers in it. For a beginner, it's the best thing because in the HYIP games, usually a crowd of streamers burst. Meanwhile, the character customization was complete. Full immersion was to begin in 5 seconds. His heart beat twice as fast. Sweat ran down his forehead. His body went nowhere, his eyes went white. Sang Hyun heard voices. It seemed like someone was telling him to open his eyes. With a lot of effort, he was able to open his eyes. Everything was upside down. A few long seconds passed before Sang Hyun realized he was in the cart. Slowly assuming a sitting position, he noticed his surroundings with horror. There was a battle going on. A tall man with blonde hair appeared in front of Sang Hyun. His face was twisted with anger. This is Roman, the captain of the mercenaries. He was holding a sword pointed at Sang Hyun. He was probably the one who hit him, as the young man's face was red from the blow. Along with the insults, menacingly ordered Sang Hyun to draw his weapon as the bandits were already advancing. Everything froze. A window appeared in front of Sang Hyun, asking him to choose a weapon. A list of weapons appeared, among which the young man searched for a bow. Suddenly a comment came out of nowhere. It was quite unexpected. There were more and more of them. Most of them were encouraging, and some even shared advice about the game. Sang Hyun noticed the number of spectators, of which there were only 5. After thanking the audience for all the advice about the game and warnings about the bow, Sang Hyun still chose the bow. There were twice as many comments in the chat room. The viewers seemed to like the newcomer's boldness and charisma. They are kind of friendly to newcomers. His cherished bow flew into Sang Hyun's hands. It was quite unexpected, so he even jumped up in fear. This caused some laughs in the comments. He stood in a stupor until an angry Roman brought him back to reality. Interspersed with insults, he urged him to fight. Roman was rather abrupt and sharp-tongued. He didn't tolerate anyone. Sang Hyun drew the bowstring and took aim. It happened in an instant. He didn't realize how he had hit the bullseye and killed the bandit with a single shot. It reminded him of real Olympic in some ways, but different from traditional archery. Something between traditional and modern archery. Newbies are usually lucky, so this didn't cause any surprises in the chat. Sang-hyun had all 20 arrows, so he had to spend them wisely. A young man addressed the chat asking if arrows are always stowed with one shot. User RubySword replied that they can only put down with one shot if you hit a vital point. The game itself is pretty realistic, mimicking real organ placement. And there's a headshot mechanic, so if it lands there, one arrow is usually all it takes. After thanking user RubySword for the explanation, Sang-hyun said he would spend one arrow on each enemy. His self-confidence caused chuckles and disbelief in the chat room. It amused the archer, and he decided to prove it to them. Sang-hyun focused on his target. He counted the number of bandits. There were 20 of them, so there should be enough arrows. He drew air into his lungs and exhaled, getting into a stance. The fight continued. Sang-hyun drew the bowstring and shot arrows. Unlike the static targets, the enemies were moving, so he was afraid to miss. Still, it was easier than he thought. Each of his arrows flew straight into the target, taking out the bandits. There was only one left, the shield bearer. He won't be easy. But Sang-hyun decided to take his chances. Patiently waiting for the right moment, he waited. The shield bearer opened up. Sang-hyun fired the decisive arrow, and it hit him squarely in the head. The bandits were all over. The shield-bearer was indeed the last of the enemy. The chat was silent. That made Sang-hyun a little upset. Apparently, the shooting didn't impress him much. But this silence was the calm before the real storm of comments. The spectators were wondering how the newcomer could destroy the boss with a single shot. You can't usually headshot on bosses. He had a shield, he moved fast, so if his shot didn't have enough power, he would have dodged the arrows. Sang-hyun was puzzled. Strength is when the bowstring is at maximum tension. It wasn't difficult for him, unlike the others, and it was a surprise for spectators to learn that the rookie shot at full tension every time. At that moment, Roman approached the newcomer. He asked if it was true that Sang-hyun had fired the last shot. The archer answered in the affirmative. Roman put a hand on the newcomer's shoulder, calling him a truly amazing archer. He'd never seen anyone shoot like that before. Roman's eyes shone with a smile, and he no longer looked like an angry mercenary captain. He was literally glowing with happiness. It was something so unusual that they couldn't believe their eyes. Roman praised the rookie? Really? Who the hell was he? Roman asked with interest what the newcomer's name was. He wanted to tell the mercenary commander about the newcomer. Without thinking long, Sang-hyun introduced himself to Roman and his audience as Amand. The Kingdom Age forum, known as Kingchemin, had the same dismal atmosphere as the game itself, though most of the users were loyal fans of this game. Due to the lack of interesting events and communication, the forum turned into a room where the same questions were echoing, until one post turned the whole thing upside down. Roman praised the nub. This news instantly revitalized the chat room, which had been pining for new comments. Amand was a total nerd. He even forgot to write the name of the stream, and it was generated automatically. Users were simply perplexed. Some of them wondered whether this very game had been played, but users had no choice but to believe what was happening. Amand was definitely a newcomer, as the date of his registration was visible. And in capsule games, you couldn't create a new account unless you knew how to create a new body for yourself, or rewrite your fingerprints. Sang-hyun sat at the table, flipping through the forum with interest, reading the comments to himself. He was flattered that he was being discussed so fiercely. He came across comments where a user compared him to an Electron streamer. Electron is a legendary pro and a top-notch streamer. Sang-hyun often videos his name in the top when he searched for streamers about players. It's insanely satisfying to be compared to a top streamer. But even Electron couldn't take down the boss with one archery shot. Sang-hyun couldn't believe what was happening. He's only been streaming for one day and he's already being equaled by such legends. What's going to happen next? Sang-hyun's phone rang in the other room. He ran to it in a hurry. The caller's name came up on the screen, and it was Ju-hyuk. Strange, why was he calling his friend this early? Sang-hyun answered the call. Ju-hyuk was at work, just taking his lunch break. He wondered how his friend's first stream had gone, and he was very happy to hear that it went even better than expected. But when he found out how many spectators there were, his jaw dropped. What had Sang-hyun done on the first day that had brought out so many people? Ju-hyuk was really happy for his friend, though he was perplexed as to how he managed to get attention so quickly. Chewing on almonds, Sang-hyun replied, as if nothing had happened, that he had simply chosen a lucky game to stream. The guys talked for about 10 minutes before Sang-hyun said he had to go. He had to get ready for the stream. Joo-hyuk was surprised. Didn't Sang-hyun stream after dinner? But there were no more lunches or dinners for him. Now this was his new job. Even as he ate, he had the feeling that he was wasting his time. Manager Park's furious shout resounded throughout the dining room. Joo-hyuk hurriedly disconnected the call. Sang-hyun got up from the table, half-starved, and sat down in the pod. He wanted to start the stream as soon as possible. Ever since he'd read the forum, there was no way his heart would calm down. The pressure of comparisons, the tension of being discussed. It had been so long since he had felt this, and, to tell the truth, he missed it. He was so encouraged by people's interest and appreciation. Sang-hyun started the broadcast. From the first few seconds, comments started flying in. The chat was running faster than yesterday. Users were really happy about the unexpected stream. They expressed their surprise and joy in the comments. The number of spectators was very different from yesterday. Today there were 189. The number increased 9 times all in one day. Sang-hyun didn't expect that very forum to make so much noise. He'd never been in this situation before, so he was a little nervous. With excitement, he clenched his hand into a fist, a drop of sweat rolling down his face. The boy took a deep breath. When he was worried, he just imagined that none of this was real, but just a game he was playing in third person. And when he went into the illusion like that, the nervousness evaporated like magic. Sang-hyun smiled and calmly greeted all the spectators. He had to continue from where it ended yesterday. Kim Joo-hyuk was sitting at his desk in the office, angrily sipping his coffee. They say even dogs shouldn't be disturbed while it's there. But that manager Puck, he was so obnoxious. Kim Joo-hyuk was really annoyed. Trying to calm down, he took small sips of coffee. He received a message from Sang-hyun. He thanked his friend for his help and promised to buy Kim Joo-hyuk a drink next time. He smiled sweetly as he looked at the message. It was nice to see how hard his friend was working, and he seemed happy. It warmed Joo-hyuk's heart. Sang-hyun had always been a responsible guy, so he couldn't doubt that his friend could handle it. Kim Joo-hyuk had an epiphany. He just remembered why he had called Sang-hyun. He wanted to tell him something, but he had completely forgotten about it. Memories from yesterday came to mind. The owner of the capsule rental company had asked me to be sure to give Sang-hyun some important information. But at that moment, a secretary approached Kim. She reminded him that he was expected in conference room 3. He had a meeting there. With a polite smile, Kim Joo-hyuk said he would be right over. The secretary left. He scratched his head, trying to remember what exactly he was supposed to tell Sang-hyun. Something definitely capsule-related. I think it's something about body optimization or something like that. Last night before he went to bed, Sang-hyun did a little bit of information scouring, surfing various websites. It was mostly about how popular streamers manage their audience, about controversial situations. He also read about some common taboos and stuff. They wrote about how mentioning the number of viewers can break audience engagement. It encourages competition with other streamers. It was also mentioned not to let the audience think of the person hosting the stream as just a streamer, to make the stream seem more personal. After deciding to use these tips, Sang-hyun politely greeted his viewers. He called some of them by their nicknames. It was nice for the guys to hear their nicknames from an aspiring streamer, so the advice from the internet proved to work. After chatting with some of the spectators, Amon started the game. Full immersion initialization was in progress. In a moment Amon was on horseback, and he immediately decided to do what he was good at. Yesterday after the stream he spent some more time in the game. He asked Roman to introduce him to the head of the mercenaries, and now he has a new quest. But first he needs to deal with a more tedious task. He needs to briefly bring the audience up to speed. There was nothing special about this quest. After explaining everything to the audience, a window with a task appeared in front of Amon. It was to escort a nobleman. Amon thought Nemanic men were supposed to fight on the battlefield. He felt as if he were a bodyguard. He was riding a horse, thinking about how realistic this game was after all. It was like he was really riding a horse. Roman's voice came from the right, asking him if it was his first time riding a horse. Amon replied that no, not for the first time. But he had not had many opportunities to ride her. It was probably just a normal scripted phrase because he said it completely naturally. Roman sullenly said to hurry up and get used to it, Amon thought he was back to his usual self, but Roman Super politely added that he would often have to ride a horse in the future, smiling the sweetest smile possible. Chat was again shocked at what was happening, at Roman's behavior, but it was already rather amusing. The mercenary squad had already been riding along the trail for about half an hour. The comments began to discuss the appearance of bandits on horseback. Before Amon knew it, a crowd of mounted brigands appeared in front of the troop. The battle began, the vanguard was broken through. The mercenaries went on the attack. The commands of the ringleader were heard through the howls of the warriors and the clang of swords. The brigands were somewhere around 50. Amon got down to business, dealing first with those in front. The fun began in the chat room. The viewers seemed to like this kind of content. Among them were those who doubted or wanted Amon to screw up. It's a typical reaction in the sports world. He's used to it. It's pretty easy to shut them up. Amon grabbed an arrow, calculating the number of brigands. There were about 50 of them, and they were really fast. With thoughts that his results would silence some spectators, Amon drew his bowstring and took aim. It wasn't even an ambush this time. Why do these mercenaries always lose everywhere? First, Amon decided to get rid of the bandits in front of him. His first arrow hit the bullseye. The bandit fell before he could even make a sound. Everyone froze in surprise, and the chat room was in complete turmoil. Amon had just taken out a boss named Burka with a single shot. Amon didn't realize what was going on right away, though. He shot that one because he was riding ahead, who knew it would be their leader. He watched in amazement at how the chat was flying and how fast the net online was growing. It was already being watched by 230 viewers. Amon was honored by the audience's enthusiasm for him. But the battle was not over, so he moved on. Amon had enough joy in the fact that he would leave the battlefield victorious, so he acted with persistence, drawing the bowstring to the fullest again, launching his nimble arrows that always hit the target. He put down one bandit after another. Hearing the smell of burning, the bandits began to flee from the battlefield. But Amon was not ready to retreat. He fired another arrow, hitting another bandit from behind. The mission was updated. Roman ordered to catch up and kill the bandits, every last one of them. Amon was determined. He sped up, moving on the trail of the bandits. The stream was watched by 230 viewers, including streamer Acorn Jelly. He went to the Kingdom Age game website to see if there was any news about him. But after seeing all the commotion that was going on in the chat rooms, he decided to find out what was up. Everyone was talking about some Amon. Who the hell was that? He'd never heard of him before. Everyone was furiously discussing how he had put Burka down with a single archery shot. That got Acorn Jelly interested. He wondered who this foolish streamer was that he wanted to play this unpopular game. Turns out it was this strange newcomer. Streamer clicked on the link to Amon's stream with interest, thinking he might be like him. But when the stream turned on and he saw it, he couldn't believe his eyes at first. All the bandits had been killed by a single arrow to the head. A simple headshot wasn't enough to instantly put someone down, and they all fell into an eternal slumber in an instant without even realizing what had happened to them. Acorn Jelly suddenly felt a sense of anticipation. He was even sweating a little from the pleasant excitement. Did all of this really happen? Was that the perfect shot? In Kingdom Age, an enemy will instantly fall if you hit their vital point. But this only works for enemies of a certain level. If the player is facing a boss, even a critical hit won't take him down in one hit. Everyone knows this, but there's actually a hidden system in the game that almost everyone doesn't even know about. The only skill that can beat a critical hit that has better accuracy than a headshot is a perfect shot. But most players aren't even aware it exists. Even the olds argue about whether it exists or not. That's because no one's ever used it before. Is it even realistic to fulfill such a stupid condition? Attack in the first second and a half and hit the center of the enemy's vital point? That weird streamer Amon looks like he not only did well, but every shot he took afterward was perfect. Acorn Jelly thought, what if it was some kind of cheat? But he quickly dismissed such thoughts. Who would use this crap? No one would play with a cheat. He was so interested in the newcomer that he typed his name into a search engine. Maybe he was playing other games? What did he even do? What is he, an Olympic gold medalist? But the internet didn't give out any information about him. Then Acorn Jelly was surprised to realize that Amon was a nub. At this moment Amon was riding his horse after the escaped brigands. Through the trampling could be heard Roman's voice giving new commands. Suddenly he turned to the archer. He asked if he was going to shoot from horseback. Roman's words were echoed by the commentators. They advised him, as if in a friendly way, not to take any risks, as the chance of hitting someone from a horse was minuscule. But Amand liked shooting, so he refused to get off his horse. Roman backed him up, saying he had confidence in him, and rode on. Sang-hyun had never ridden a horse before, and this was the first time he had to shoot at a moving target. But he was confident that he could do it. Yes, no matter how much he imagined it, his hands were still shaking. But he couldn't give up. The bandits were already visible, they couldn't get far. He lowered the arrow, but it hit him in the neck, even though he had aimed for his head. It wasn't what he wanted. It wouldn't work. He concentrated better and thought about adjusting to the horse's rhythm. Amand raised his bow, drew the bowstring. It was the right moment, and he released his arrow. He took his opponent down with a precise headshot. But he wasn't going to stop. He fired arrows one after another, all of them penetrating the heads of the bandits. The rest of the squad could only stop to marvel at the accuracy of his shots, as all the opponents were outgunned by Amand alone. It happened in a matter of seconds. He fired arrows that hit the target precisely so that all the enemies were destroyed. Roman couldn't believe that so many enemies could be put down in the blink of an eye. And it was all thanks to the archer alone. He called Amand a heaven-sent archer, and the other mercenaries picked up on that. They praised him, saying how lucky they were to have him on their team. The chat quickly became animated. The spectators who had once gone through this game were puzzled. It was the first time they had seen the mercenaries so emotional. Some didn't understand why such a talented player was in such a game, and some praised his talent, admiring him. After defeating all the enemies, the nobleman he was accompanying approached Amand. He thanked him personally. While Amand was reading the comments, he received his first donation. His first 100,000 won from user Acorn Jelly. The attached message talked about his perfect shots. Amand didn't know anything about this user, but from the reaction, he realized that the one was quite famous. The archer froze and didn't know what to do. The commentators wondered why he didn't react to the donation in any way. The thing was, he had no idea how to react to it. Someone in the chat room advised him to just shoot a bow. He raised his bow aloft and released an arrow. No one understood why he would release an arrow into the air, but a moment later it flew back, piercing his head. The game was over. Sang-hyun returned to reality. The audience was delighted with the crazy self-destruction for 100,000 won. Sang-hyun used to shoot blunted arrows. He was glad they liked it, but he didn't understand why he was kicked out of the stream. Maybe it was because the pod was an older generation. There was no cooling system in the capsule, so Sang-hyun was sweating insanely hard during the game. The broadcast was over, but the chat thankfully didn't close. He decided to write in the comments that he was thrown out of the game because of an old pod. The audience reacted much better than Sang-hyun could have expected. They called him back into the game and called him a legend. Someone called him very talented. He figured he didn't need to explain to them that he was used to changing the angle of trajectory to hit a target. It was obvious. Sang-hyun was pleased to read such comments. It was good for the streamer. After a while, he announced that there would be no more streaming for today. Sang-hyun washed his face. He walked around the room with his phone in his hands, still reading the comments in the chat room. They were talking about Acorn Jelly and his donation. Jang Hyun typed his nickname into AllTube. Just as he thought, it turned out to be quite popular. After watching a few of his videos, he realized that one was awesome. True, the test with the bow he was doing was not very good, but the other videos were just fine. Sang-hyun suddenly thought, what did such a popular streamer forget from him? At that moment he received a notice from Tribe. It was a message from Acorn Jelly himself. Acorn Jelly is not just a master at Kingdom Age, but a versatile game streamer. Sang-hyun wanted to become one too. Financially, it's much more favorable. Acorn Jelly offered Sang-hyun a collaboration. A collab with Acorn Jelly is a big chance to gain wider exposure. Sang-hyun got a call from his friend. Ju-hyuk quit his old job, so now he's a free agent. Ju-hyuk proposed a crazy idea to his friend to become his manager. Speaking of Ju-hyuk, he was a true friend who thought about Sang-hyun and his interest. A few hours later, at a cafe, two people were sitting at a table for four: a young girl Na-young and Do Jae-mook, the same acorn jelly. Na Young was his manager. They discussed their upcoming meeting with Amand. Amand had the best physicality in the country. For Jae-mook, he was kind of an investment in the future. At the moment of their heated discussion, Sang-hyun appeared in a smart black suit. Joo-hyuk appeared from behind, and they both made too vivid an impression on Na Young. It was almost 2 hours. The guys were discussing the stream sequence, important issues. It was time to discuss the financial part, and Jae-mook offered the guys half of his donations for the first time. Walking around the city, a completely happy Sang-hyun and Joo-hyuk discussed their recent conversation with the streamer. The minimum donation from one acorn jelly stream is 2 million won. There was no limit to their happiness. Joo-hyuk admitted that he recorded their conversation with Jae-mook. When Sang-hyun was at home, he turned on the broadcast where many viewers immediately rushed in. Upon hearing the rumors, asked about the collab with acorn jelly, but Sang-hyun pretended not to know. Amand wanted to go after the bandit leader today. Ruby Sword sent Amand 100,000 won for destroying the boss with one shot, and he accepted the challenge. Amand received a few more donations with wishes of good luck and additional tasks. A full dive has begun. Amand was right where he finished last time. A pleasant female voice of thanksgiving sounded from somewhere behind me. It was a girl of incredible beauty. There was a risk of the remaining bandits scattering all over the mountain range. Roman offered to send a special unit to destroy them, but the guards were to stay where they were and set up camp. Night had fallen. The squad was moving towards the target, the bandits' camp. They planned to get closer and strike from the rear. Amand was a little nervous. The sensation of total immersion from reality was almost indistinguishable. He could no longer swing away. The squad went on the attack. Amand fired arrow after arrow, taking down the bandits. He unknowingly fulfilled the condition 3 headshots in a row, for which he gained the skill of consistent shooting. He activated a new skill and used it immediately. It was like a rain of arrows. The enemies fell one by one. When everything quieted down, one of the mercenaries suddenly saw the body of the boss, struck by a single arrow. The audience absolutely did not want to believe what was happening, but Acorn Jelly stepped in for Amand, telling them about the perfect shot. Acorn Jelly sent a donation of 100,000 won with an explanation about the perfect shot. A storm of comments started in the chat room. No one wanted to believe it existed, which made Acorn Jelly angry. It was the right moment to announce a collaboration with Acorn Jelly. Amand has accepted the offer. The next day, the guys should do a joint stream and show a perfect shot. After numerous donations, Amand ends the stream with another arrow launched at his head. Sang-hyun received a call from Joo-hyuk. They discussed the upcoming meeting and interview. Meanwhile, the stream's video on AllTube racked up more than 40,000 views in an hour. Acorn Jelly released a teaser of their joint stream, so the audience was warmed up to the fullest. Is there such a thing as a perfect shot? Everyone will find out tomorrow at the joint stream. Acorn Jelly's stream had a record number of viewers on all of AllTube. Cheongai Station. In an expensive office building, one office was occupied by 4 young men. Na Young and Joo-hyuk were sitting at the table, watching what was going on. And the 2 streamers, Acorn Jelly and Amand, were preparing for the start of the broadcast, where the latter was to show his face to the public for the first time. The stream is starting. 10,000 viewers since it started. Before Jae-mook interacted with the audience until more people swarmed in. With every second the audience was getting bigger. The mark reached 38,000. The moment Amand appeared on the screens, there were already more than 40,000 viewers. As Sang-hyun sat down at the table, the chat just exploded with comments praising his beauty. The chat was flying. The comments came one after another. Sang-hyun didn't have time to read a single word. The plan was to play Kingdom Age first, then interview Sang-hyun. The first question from Jae-mook was about the optimization code. The code was needed to adjust the capsule to the brainwave body. But Sang-hyun didn't know about any code. At this moment, Joo-hyuk suddenly remembered that he had wanted to tell him about it 3 days ago, but had completely forgotten. It turns out that all this time Sun was playing without optimization. That's why he was crashing a lot. Sang-hyun's casual demeanor attracted attention. Some people, like Jae-mook, even thought he was a genius. He was the typical genius that everyone wants. He looked like he had experience with people, which was great for a streamer. Finished with the optimization code, the streamers found themselves in an empty space with only a digital blue floor. Sang-hyun felt virtual space for the first time, as if there was no body at all. It's time to find out, does the perfect shot really exist? The boys found themselves on the forest path with the rest of the mercenary squad. Everyone listened to Roman standing in front of them. Roman was dictating a new assignment from Emilia. There was a goblin cave not far from that place, which made it impossible for the farmers to live. The squad had to find this place and blow all the goblins to smithereens. On the way to the cave, Acorn Jelly was telling Almond about the conditions of a perfect shot, until an enraged Roman knocked J Mook on the head for not getting out in time, because the wagon had already arrived at the location. Roman treated Almond with affection and hospitality. He smiled sweetly at him. The squad hid in the bushes, waiting for the right moment to attack the dreaded goblins. But Almond didn't wait for such a moment. He drew the bowstring, feeling light after the optimization. That unpleasant feeling was gone. Almond put the arrow back in the bullseye. It was like he was even tougher. Even his shot was quieter for ambush shooting. In addition to the monstrous data, he had a special trait that was evident in his speech and behavior. To J Mook, it was as if Yu Sang-hyun was standing in a ray of light at that very moment. All the goblin guards were destroyed by Almond, for which he received further praise from Roman. It was incredible. Usually all the mercenaries had to plow together to pass this stage, but Almond cleaned it all up on his own. And he did it brilliantly. The new assignment was to block the entrance to the cave and start a fire so the rest of the pack couldn't get out and stayed in there. As the mercenaries were carrying out the task, muffled thuds were suddenly heard, making the ground shake. A few moments later he showed up, Goblin Champion. A great and intimidating boss. An icon popped up with a new task for Almond. Chat was looking forward to seeing Almond use the perfect shot. But there was one problem. The big goblin had an iron mask on his face, so it was simply impossible for him to shoot. There was no point in aiming for the head. Then an idea struck him. We should pick another weak point of the enemy. Almond pointed the bow upwards and fired. For a perfect shot, you have to hit a vital point, so you don't necessarily have to do it through the forehead. Almond was confident despite the commentator's disbelief. Before anyone knew it, his nimble arrow had hit the bullseye again. The Goblin Champion only staggered and fell with a thud. Everyone looked at it with their mouths hanging open, unable to believe their eyes. Took out the boss with one shot. Well, now he's proven the existence of the perfect shot. But it was Acorn Jelly who was happiest of all. His eyes were shining, and he was as happy as a child. Not a minute later, Almond started receiving numerous donations from viewers. Sang-hyun sighed heavily, wiping away the sweat. He tried to catch his breath. Looks like even the top-of-the-line pods didn't have a proper cooling system. Before J Mook rejoiced like a child, it was a true triumph. Now everyone definitely knows about the perfect shot. Due to server overload, the stream dropped. If you think about it, all because of chat and donations. This is the first time this has happened. The guys were thrown out of the game, but the stream, as it turned out, continued. So it was decided to record the interview. Sang-hyun and J Mook reappeared on the screens of thousands of viewers, which made those viewers happy. They hosted a relaxed stream, accepted congratulations and donations from viewers, and just chatted with fans. A friendly atmosphere reigned, but the most interesting thing was the number of donations. J Mook didn't even have time to read them. Nobody expected such a thing. The usual donation window appeared on the screen. But this has upset not only the streamers themselves and their managers, but everyone associated with the stream. User Seojaya sent 1,000,001. There was a message attached praising Yu Sang-hyun's beauty. Right after that followed another donation with the same amount, with the same message and from the same user. J Mook felt a twinge of envy, but he didn't show it. He was still very happy for Sang-hyun. Soon this news will fly all over the internet and they will both become much more famous than they were before. While the chat room was in turmoil, J Mook made a list of questions based on the votes. All the questions were directed at Sang-hyun. They were pretty simple, like whether he had a girlfriend or how he took care of his skin. J Mook was a little annoyed. What were these stupid questions? And why was Sang-hyun answering them? Though it's not surprising that the chat room has gotten so interested in Sang-hyun, since most Acorn Jelly fans are girls. Confused and flattered, Sang-hyun answered all the questions, further annoying J Mook. Sang-hyun did not have a girlfriend, which caused cute smiles on the faces of thousands of female fans. Yu Sang-hyun felt a little embarrassed, but all this attention still warmed his heart. He liked it a lot. He thought it was a good fit for him. Streaming archery. The stream continued, with the guys continuing to answer questions and thanking viewers for donating. The stream went on for about another half hour before they said goodbye to the fans and the camera turned off. It was interesting. It was a bit hard in places, but it was insanely exciting. As soon as the camera turned off, the guys thanked each other for their hard work. Na Young ran up to Sang Hyun, giving him a towel soaked in cold water so he could freshen up a bit. Jae Mook hadn't encountered such a problem as sweat in the capsule. He assumed it was due to the fact that he was great at concentration. This was the first time Jae Mook had seen such a payoff on the stream, for which he thanked Sang Hyun and Kim Joo Hyuk separately. In return for taking care of them, Joo Hyuk handed Na Young and Jae Mook a box of cookies and cakes as a token of his gratitude. Sang Hyun suddenly thought that Kim Joo Hyuk was really good at his job. While Na Young was preparing dessert, the three guys decided to talk about the stream they had just done and the money they had earned. Jae Mook flipped over his clipboard, where the amount of money raised that day was written. Sang Hyun and Kim Joo Hyuk froze. For a moment, the room was completely silent. It was as if no one was even breathing. Sang Hyun even got a little sweat on his forehead. Joo Hyuk blinked his eyes a few times and adjusted his glasses. He was ready to pinch himself. What if he was dreaming? The total revenue was 5,360,000 won. It was an absolute record. Na Young came over to the guys with drinks and dessert given by Joo Hyuk. If you divided the amount by 2, it was 2,700,000, almost 3 million. Sang Hyun and Joo Hyuk bowed to the guys in gratitude. An embarrassed Jae Mook stopped them. His streamers had never had such large donations. According to him, even 500,000 won on the streamer is already considered a good jackpot. This led Joo Hyuk to think that donations were not the main source of income. He asked Jae Mook how exactly he got the money. Turns out it's all about advertising. Tribe's ad revenue is proportional to the number of viewers. It's kind of like a paycheck. In addition, managers must bring in third-party advertisers. It is their job to do so. It's mostly advertising for games or merchandise. For example, clothing, stream equipment, and capsule sponsorship. Jae Mook himself was already wearing clothes from the sponsor during this stream. Basically, it's very similar to what all celebrities usually do. Na Young didn't miss the opportunity to tease Jae Mook, saying that really attractive people get almost all of their income from donations. And Jae Mook has nothing to do but act like a celebrity and promote clothes and games. This hurt Jae Mook quite a bit, and they started to argue. Kim Joo Hyuk covered his eyes with his hand, and Sang Hyun watched with interest as he sipped his coke. Na Young suddenly addressed him saying that he could partially act like a star, for which she received another displeased look from Jae Mook. Her speech was picked up by Jae Mook. He was very happy to share advice with his new colleague. He said that besides streaming classes, outside hobbies are just as important. For example, like streamer Horn Ramen, who long before that was a cartoonist. While he streams games as his main content, he also works in the entertainment industry. He appears on various shows quite often. Jae Mook continued his story. Streamers can be divided into 2 parts. The bulk of them focus only on creating content for AllTube, and there are streamers who are more niche as they pile on Tribe streamers. Na Young intervened in Jae Mook's speech, advising Sang Hyun to consider moving into a broader field. They were closer to a niche field. It was also simply necessary to find a good editor, as the edited videos had a significant impact on AllTube. Jae Mook asked Joo Hyuk if he had any experience in editing, but Kim Joo Hyuk waved him away. For so long the boys discussed the most important topics that it was almost dark outside. They all walked down to the underground parking lot together, where Sang Hyun and Joo Hyuk could get into the car and drive away. Before even getting into the car, Sang Hyun and Jae Mook agreed to another joint stream. Smiling amicably, Jae Mook said that maybe by then, Sang Hyun would be way ahead of him. The boys got into the car, and a farewell klaxon chime echoed throughout the parking lot. Looking at the receding car, Jae Hyuk smiled silently. He was envious in a kindly way. Sang Hyun's talent was a crawl away from China. As evening came on, it got significantly colder outside, so the guys soon went inside, discussing the incredible events that had happened today. As Joo Hyuk drove Sang Hyun to his house, they had time to discuss everything. The car stopped in a poor neighborhood. Joo Hyuk told his friend to take his time and not to think too much about AllTube and Tribe. Lastly, he praised him, saying that he was insanely talented and he would succeed. After saying goodbye, he left. Sang-hyun walked up the steps to the house alone. It was getting colder by the minute outside. Sang-hyun's mind was filled with memories that hurt his heart. A picture of him helping his grandmother up the slippery steps, holding her warm hand, appeared before his eyes. Sang-hyun looked at the already starry sky, sighing sadly. He smiled bitterly as he continued walking and turned to his grandmother. She might have heard him at that moment. He shared his joy about the money he had earned, and the fact that Ju-hyuk hadn't taken a penny from him. But he kept talking as if Granny was right there. Inside the capsule, his right hand didn't shake at all. Everything was absolutely fine. Returning to reality, he clenched his right hand into a fist and went back to drowning in bitter memories. That car accident was a terrible memory for him. Not only for him, but for his grandmother, too. He remembered his grandmother's wrinkled eyes as she sobbed alone, hidden from everyone. So his right hand is more than just a nightmarish memory. It was the most hated part of his body that hurt not only him, but his grandmother as well. But at the same time, it is what accompanied him in everything and always. It was there for him. His right hand had always been a dark and unpleasant shadow that had followed him ever since that moment. But now he could draw her bowstring again. Isn't that amazing? His grandmother would faint if she saw him now. Sang-hyun is now surrounded by many good people who help him with everything. It feels like they were sent by his grandmother. Hot tears suddenly flowed down Sang-hyun's cheeks, which he tried to swipe away with his hand. He's going to do everything he can. But what if it's too late to act? He imagined how angry his grandmother would be at him for saying or even thinking such things. She would definitely convince him to work hard for his dream and never give up. Full of confidence, he promised his grandmother that he would never, ever leave this business. It was just a pity that she wouldn't be able to see it. That was Sang-hyun's biggest regret. At that moment in the office, Na-young and Jae-mook were following all sorts of forums, reading comments about them. They were already widely known. Literally everyone was talking about them, mostly mentioning Sang-hyun and his perfect shot. A post from the Kingdom Age community made the top 10 for the first time. It was just incredible. Na-young told Jae-mook about the cool video that the editing community posted. Na-young sent him the link so he could watch the video, and Jae-mook watched it. A smile involuntarily appeared on his face. Sang-hyun felt as if the heavens were giving Sang-hyun a helping hand. It seemed like they had found a good editor. On the tree branch outside Sang-hyun's window, birds chirped merrily, announcing the morning to the world. The rays of the morning sun, not yet warming much, reflected in the windows of every house in the neighborhood. There was a light on in one of them. It was Sang-hyun's house. He was taking his morning shower, doing so unknowingly as his thoughts were on something else entirely. Stepping out from under the jets of refreshing water, he toweled his hair and thought about yesterday's events. He tried to lay it all out. It was quite clear that streamers have the two most important schemes for making money. These are donations from streams and profit from advertising proportional to the number of viewers, which is what Tribe is actually designed for. It's not that hard to get donations. The main thing is to be able to push the right buttons of the audience, so to speak. Do things too well, or, as many do, make mistakes. Streamer Horn Ramen is a good and vivid example. His well-edited videos get to the top, thus attracting new viewers. Fans want to be like him, and aspiring streamers want good quality. That's how good advertising for a gaming headset happens. Sang-hyun will most likely go for the so-called star style that is often practiced on AllTube. That's what Jae-mook was talking about yesterday with so much interest. Ju-hyuk also talked about it. According to him, Sang-hyun didn't look like acorn jelly. It was more like Horn Ramen. Jae-mook was too hot on the idea of aiming for a star-studded medal. But Sang-hyun saw big differences between his style and Horn Ramen's style. The one had a well-tempered tongue, but it was only in the games themselves that he often made mistakes and did not strive to pass them perfectly. Ju-hyuk was probably referring to his money-making scheme. Profits from AllTube advertising sponsors. Sang-hyun realized how much he needed a good editor. After getting out of the shower, Sang-hyun ran to the computer in a hurry, opening the search engine. He thought maybe among the talent he could look for guys who edit popular videos. Upon opening the first site, he immediately stumbles upon a video of an archer from Kingdom Age. The video was trending. 110,000 views in just 17 hours. With a click of the mouse, the video started playing. A few seconds passed when Sang-hyun finally recognized the archer as himself. He quickly stopped the video when he saw the name of the channel, Almond Fan Seojaya, and then it hit him. It was the same person who had donated 1,000,000 won to him and Jae-mook yesterday. With even more interest, Sang-hyun turned on the video again. It was insanely beautiful. The music in the background, the color grading, even the editing that complemented the story. Sang-hyun felt like he was watching the most real movie. And then he appears on the screen, a brilliant archer, who with one single arrow strikes the enemy. Everything was so beautiful and dynamic that Sang-hyun was even amazed by his own play. When the video came to an end, he scrolled down with interest to read the comments. The Kingdom Age game itself is insanely difficult to play through. And here comes some genius archer who turns everything upside down. The comments were mostly discussing the fact that absolutely no one but Almond can play like that anymore. Some commentators compared the fan video to a drama with a huge budget. And there were those who had never heard of a certain Almond. With his mood lifted from reading the messages, Sang-hyun decided to call Ju-hyuk, and that's when he received a message from him. After opening a chat room with a friend, he saw the same video from user Seojaya. Ju-hyuk suggested writing to that user. Even though Sang-hyun wasn't thrilled with the idea, since he can't even pay his friend, Ju-hyuk promised to call him and wished his friend a good game. We should strike while the iron is hot. It wouldn't be nice of Sang-hyun to abandon the game when he had a manager like Ju-hyuk. So he got up from the table and, kneading the muscles in his arms, walked to his pod. He was a great shot, but compared to the other streamers, his physical attributes weren't that outstanding. If he wants to stream like a pro, practicing is very, very important for him. Sang-hyun sat down in the capsule. An icon appeared in front of him, asking him to choose the difficulty of the training. Without wasting a moment to think about it, Sang-hyun immediately chose the maximum one. A few hours later, Sang-hyun, completely tired and sweaty, came out of the capsule. Almost exhausted, he moved to the refrigerator and took out the milk. After taking a few sips, he realized how hungry he was. The clock showed almost 5 p.m., so he needed to start the stream. Sang-hyun decided to have a quick snack, so he poured some almonds into his plate. He had 5 minutes to spare, so while munching on almonds, he decided to check out the new comments under their collaborative video on AllTube. A few minutes later, it was time to start the broadcast. There were 5 seconds left, but Sang-hyun suddenly became very nervous. Practically in the center, a beautiful building towered over the city. Punk is the largest domestic game distributor. On one floor in an office sat a sad and lost hope young man, about 35 years old. Lowering his head over the table, he wondered if he had gotten into this game for nothing. It was about that very game, Kingdom Age. He knew from the beginning that this genre would not be commercially successful. But he had no idea it would sell so poorly. But the situation had to improve, right? The feedback from the experts is pretty good. Ideas popped into his head. Maybe create an event to attract players? But those ideas were brushed aside by his pessimistic side. No one would do that for a game that is completely unmarketable. But the fight was still on, and optimism entered the fray. Suddenly some top player would appear in the game. But that thought was also delusional, the man thought. This game wasn't even on the list for cybersports. What other top player is there? He lazily opened a search engine and typed the name of the game in there, thinking of possibilities and options to revive it. But after seeing the very same video from user Seojaya in the query tops, he suddenly perked up. Immediately he turned it on and was amazed. The quality was mind-blowing, the editing gorgeous, but this player, his skills were unbelievable. It seemed strange to him that he didn't know of such a streamer. A few seconds later, the man realized that the streamer's account had been created just a couple of days ago. Almond, he's not only capable but a talented streamer. His popularity is growing insanely fast. He's also handsome. Since he's a rookie, his numbers will be low, but if they give him a boost, things could work out. The man hovered over a rectangular purple button and clicked it, signing up for Almond's updates. At the same instant, he received a notification that a new Almond broadcast had begun. How timely it was. He decided to go to the stream immediately. What he saw surprised him. The broadcast has only been going on for a few seconds, and the viewers have already piled in over 1,000. Have there ever been so many before? Sang-hyun was also puzzled by the number of people online, and that number continued to grow steadily. and the chat room was going crazy. A collaboration with a famous streamer, a perfect shot, then a legendary video. Whatever the reason, once you break the 1,000-person barrier, you can become a streamer on a permanent basis. Who was also watching his friend's broadcast, was just cheering with joy for him. But Sang-hyun was as silent as if he had water in his mouth. A sweat appeared on his forehead, and he was still very nervous. A riot broke out in the comments. Someone was spamming, someone was trying to stop the spamming, and someone was admiring the beauty of the streamer. Sang-hyun almost didn't have time to read the comments as the chat was just flying. He recalled yesterday's joint stream where there were 50,000 viewers. And everything went literally perfect as Jae-mook and Na-young organized everything perfectly. And now he was faced with the ultimate question. How could he handle this alone? Sang-hyun closed his eyes and took a few deep breaths. Sang-hyun closed his eyes and took a few deep breaths. In the comments, everyone started asking him to show his face. Most of them were newcomers who got on the stream because of the hype. Those guys that have been with him since the beginning knew that Amand was always streaming without a camera. A notification arrived on his phone. When he opened it, he saw the link sent by Joo-hyuk. These were leaked photos of Sang-hyun from yesterday's joint stream. These photos were edited by some fan, because in big letters there were written words of admiration for his beauty. In truth, was embarrassed by what he saw. But he'd be lying if he said he didn't like it. Joo-hyuk texted him to turn on the camera. And within seconds, his face was seen by over 1,000 of his fans. They just came to love what they saw. Donations started flying in almost immediately, but there was no time. Sang-hyun started the game. The sun had already gone below the horizon. The sky was purple-orange, studded with faint dots. Amand found himself in a large field. Before him stood the beautiful Amelia in a dark silk cloak. She addressed Amand, mentioning his past accomplishments. She spoke of the goblins that were a thorn in their side and prevented them from living in peace. The wind played with her blonde hair. Her big, drowning eyes stared straight into his soul. In the chat room, all the commenters were just crazy about her beauty. Someone managed to dedicate love odes to her. Amand squeezed out the words that he wasn't alone, but Amelia interrupted him. She knew he'd done it alone. Roman had told her everything. She took Amand's hand. The touch of her palm was as gentle as if it had been mulberry silk. The commentators were puzzled by what they saw. Amelia said that she had a new assignment for Amand. He, not understanding what was going on, asked why she didn't ask Commander Roman about it. But Amelia wanted him to complete this task in his proud solitude. The Lord agreed to that as well. She pointed her slender finger at the majestic castle at the foot of the mountains. Amand tried to reassure himself by thinking that a solo mission couldn't be too difficult. But he was not very good at it. The silly smile wiped off his face when he heard Amelia ask to destroy the lord of that castle. And when asked by Amand if the lord often left the castle, she answered in the negative. Amelia clasped both of his hands in hers and, full of confidence, said she was sure of him. Amand received donations with jokes in attached messages from viewers. A window appeared in front of him asking if he wanted to accept the assignment. Amand had a few seconds to think. Meanwhile, in Punk's office, the man in the suit still continued to watch Amand's broadcast. He was puzzled by Amelia's assignment. He's played Kingdom Age many times, but completing this quest with a bow is simply impossible. Anyone who has ever participated in a siege knows how hard it is. Kingdom Age sieges were notorious for their incredible difficulty. You had to climb every wall, and the enemy's artificial intelligence was so advanced that once they detected the player, they were immediately surrounded. Ambush is almost impossible. Someone even said that the border between North and South Korea is easier to cross. But the biggest problem was Lord Talorant himself. He was armored from head to toe. He was the worst possible opponent for an archer. The man suddenly thought, what if Amand could actually complete this mission with a bow? In his opinion, Amand was capable and handsome, but in this realm, that alone was not enough to become a star. It required a little bit of magic. Amand accepted a new quest. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he needed to complete this quest to succeed. Kingdom Age prided itself on its historical accuracy, and Amand knew that medieval castles are not as large as they are commonly believed to be. There were probably about 50 people there. Amand was quite optimistic and believed he could handle it, but he was interested in something else at that moment. What reason could Amelia have for ordering someone's destruction? Even though she was just a game character, She didn't seem like someone who could hate or hurt others. He voiced his question aloud. Emilia thought for a moment before answering. According to her, Talleyrand turned his people into slaves. He lent them money with bail at a predatory interest rate and forced them to repay the debt. He turned them into slaves obligated to serve him until the end of their days, including women and children. If the Lord falls into eternal sleep, Emilia's family could take care of those people. Emilia would have preferred to start a war, but there was no good reason to do so. Amund bowed to her and began his task. Night had already fallen, and not far from the castle a lone wolf howled at the moon. The archer was in the cornfield. He had to cover the distance to the castle, which he did quite silently. He moved much better than before, and he could feel it himself. It was all thanks to the training. Not for nothing had he spent more than 3 hours on it. Amund found himself at the stone wall of the castle. There were 2 guards nearby, making it difficult for him to get over the wall. You have to think hard and weigh your decision there, because if he attacked recklessly, they would call for reinforcements. Amund remembered the book that said to sneak up behind him, clamp his mouth shut, pull him aside, and silently destroy the enemy. But he realized himself that he wasn't very confident with other weapons yet. He had one idea. He thought of a way to take them both down with a single bow shot. The audience couldn't believe what was happening. How was he going to take out 2 people in one fell swoop? This is Kingdom Age, not Hollywood. It wasn't an easy task. More like one of the toughest. If he shot one of them, the others would raise the alarm. So Amund had to kill them all at once. But that's impossible. Amund was not daunted by this difficulty. He was sure he could do it. He watched the guards on the wall carefully. The guards walked on opposite sides of the wall, but 2 times they had to cross. Amund had been waiting for this moment. First he wanted to take down the one on the left. He raised his bow, pulling the bowstring to the stop. He was going to make the trajectory of the arrow longer to slow its landing. And the arrow flew out silently. Amund reached for another arrow. Following the arrow with his gaze, he waited for the right moment to release the second one. And it was an unimaginable double headshot. Both guards went down before they could even make a sound. The chat was exploding. The audience was in awe of Amund. It was the first time that had ever happened. Was that even possible? How did he manage to get in at the same time? There was no one else on the wall. At that moment Amund started receiving donations from loyal viewers. Amund smiled embarrassedly and politely thanked the guys for the donations and read some of the comments. His stream was still being monitored by that man in the suit from Punk's office. This is a real surprise. At what he saw, he clutched his head and widened his eyes. He was amazed at Amund's skill and talent. He has labored in the game distribution niche for many years and has seen a myriad of different players. But never once in his life had he met anyone like Amund. The man reached for his cell phone, hurriedly dialing the numbers. There was a dial tone, and then a man's voice on the other side of the receiver. It was Director Nao. The man offered to set up a meeting with him tomorrow. He said he would send a dossier on the streamer with all the details. They wanted and just had to get Amund by any means and at any cost. At this time, Amund's quest was still going on. He scrambled up the walls. When he finally reached the top, he tried to catch his breath. That toy was a living hell. Except Amund's archery was inspiring. But he surprised the audience here. Climbing the wall was usually the hardest part of the quest. Others had not even had 3 attempts. A spectator asked if he had practiced an hour before the game. Amund answered in the affirmative. He's been practicing on maximum difficulty, and he was going to do it a few times. Repetition is the mother of learning, especially for athletes. After considering the new territory, Amund decided to remove the bodies of the 2 guards so that no one or anything would suspect anything. Took him no more than 5 minutes. He left them in a dark corner where the light from the torches didn't reach them. But there was a new obstacle in his way. Another guard had noticed something amiss. He walked around the fortress with a torch in his hand, looking for the 2 guards. He thought they were sleeping somewhere again. He was only a few paces from Amund, but he couldn't see him. From the shadows an arrow came from his throat. He fell without a sound before he could blink an eye, and no one heard a thing, though there were a dozen other guards downstairs. There it was, the perfect shot. Amund continued to stack the bodies. The audience wondered if he was taking it too easy. Outside, he's quick to stab enemies, but inside the castle will be much more difficult. there will be more of them. Even a marksman can't fight in close quarters when the enemy is like a dog. Stacking them all in the same dark place, Amund thought about his next actions. Looking at the enemy's clothes, an idea came to him. 5 minutes later, he was already inside the fortress, at the entrance of the castle in his guard's clothes. It was rather uncomfortable, but he had no choice. Walking calmly in the courtyard, in the midst of the other guards, he suddenly saw the armory. He purposely said loudly that he was going to grab some arrows, so as not to arouse the suspicion of the others. No one turned a deaf ear. Amund opened the wooden door and entered the small building. A guard was passing by the armory and sensed something amiss. He turned to the suspicious archer. But he had no sooner finished his question about what he had forgotten than an arrow struck him in the forehead. But this time someone from the fortress guards spotted Amund massacring him. Amund's nostalgia kicked in. It was just like the archery competition where he had once shone. Then it was as if he had fallen out of reality, focusing entirely on the target before his eyes. Amund drew the bowstring, keeping the guardian in sight. And in that moment, the complex world was becoming clearer than it had ever been. He fired an arrow. Hit or miss, only two outcomes loomed before him. His nimble arrow hits him squarely in the head, putting the guard to eternal sleep. And before the face of this fork, his power increases to unimaginable heights. Amund ran towards the wall of the fortress. He was making quite a lot of noise. It was a secret assassination attempt, but he was so deep in himself that he heard nothing. A guard with a spear chased after Amund when he heard the noise. He shouted so that someone else knew for sure that something was wrong and was on his way to them. Amund got a little nervous, lost concentration, and shot him in the leg. Two more guards came running at the shout. One ran to the wounded man, while the other focused on the archer. Without thinking, the archer started to run away. But suddenly he turned sharply to face the guard and, running backwards, fired an arrow into his forehead. He used him as bait. And while the other two didn't fully realize what was happening, they were simultaneously shot in the head with an arrow. He again took down two in one fell swoop. The spectators were convinced that Amund was definitely in the service. A military-trained archer. The outside was already cleaned up. It was time to go inside. He quickened his pace, heading for the castle entrance. But quite suddenly another guard appeared from around the corner and immediately received his arrow in the forehead. But then, out of nowhere, three more appeared. Amund was about to give them a flurry of arrows, but someone shouted loudly that there was an intruder. One of the guards blew a trumpet, summoning all the guards and warriors. Within seconds, Amund was surrounded. Spears were thrust at him. The archer had absolutely no place to run to. He was trapped. There were 50 armed guards in front of him. What's he thinking now? Is it really over? Did he just fail the mission like that? A guard with a sword in his hand approached Amund with quick steps. The others followed him. All the spectators were watching with bated breath, and they waited with anticipation for the next action from their favorite archer. Some of the spectators were already disappointed, thinking that the invincible Amund had lost for the first time. And some tried to help their idol in any way possible. And Amund himself was not afraid. There was nothing to be afraid of. He didn't think he could just take and fail the assignment from Emilia. His arrows were at the ready. He already knew how to get out of this situation. He fired several arrows that knocked the three guards to the ground. A small window appeared in front of him, announcing sequential firing activated. That was his idea. He drew several arrows from his quiver in a confident motion. He drew the bowstring and fired a flock of arrows that struck the guards' heads. The enemies fell dead at the feet of the survivors. It frightened them terribly. What the hell was that? How did his arrows miss the heads without missing? The remaining guards decided to run as fast as they could away from this handsome monster. But he wasn't going to let them. Amund caught up with the fleeing and yelling crowd of guards. It was even funny. The onlookers were perplexed. Did he now intend to shoot on the run? Was that even possible? Yes, it's possible. Yes, it is. For Amund, anything was possible. And it wasn't that in the virtual world his hand was immovable like a rock. And it was really all about unwavering concentration. Amund accelerated. Each arrow he fired found its own head. The guards became fewer and fewer each time, until there was only one left. He ran with all his remaining strength. His face was sweating, and hot tears burned his cheeks. He was out of his mind with fear. Stammering, he shouted for mercy. But his words were not heard. The arrow struck him from the back. When the last man was down, Amand paused for a moment. The full moon shone behind him, illuminating his silhouette. At that moment, he looked like a villain and a savior at the same time. He brushed the sweat off his forehead and exhaled a sigh of relief. With a smile, he asked the audience if they were impressed with the battle. Yes, it was devilishly cool. A flurry of praise began in the comments. This was followed by a lot of donations. Amand noticed that the donations were pouring in more and more lately. Maybe his business is really picking up, he thought. It was time to pay the Lord a visit. Amand stepped confidently down from the castle wall and into the castle courtyard. He slowed his step a little. His shoes left red marks behind him. He moved steadily toward the huge wooden doors that led to the throne room. A few agonizing moments later, he opened the doors and took a step inside. He found himself in a huge room with stone walls and red banners, and a wide red carpet led to a throne where a formidable lord sat. He was clad from head to toe in iron armor. He held a huge, gigantic sword in his right hand. It wasn't what Amand expected to see. He thought he'd be a bit of an old geezer. He's got that bossy, fun-loving vibe. But Amand noticed something strange. It was as if the Lord had been waiting for him, even though Amand's arrival had been planned in secret. If he knew the archer was coming, why hadn't he gone to the aid of his men? Emilia seemed to be damn right. At the most unexpected moment, Lord Talleyrand threw his sword, which easily pierced the stone pillar. The Lord's hand and sword hilt were smoking from the force of friction. He was throwing the giant sword with ease. It was a monstrous force. Amand raised his bow before him and drew the bowstring. Only then, a moment later, did he realize nothing could penetrate his armor. What a disappointment. The Lord raised his hand and made a gesture with his finger as if he were calling for someone. A moment later, 3 guards appeared, armor up to their necks. In the comments, someone suggested that Amand use a blunt weapon. In such a situation, not only will it not get in the way, but it will be more effective. Amand thought of the Lord's sword. It's fine, but is it wise to take up a weapon you don't know how to wield? It was too risky for him. You couldn't even get through them with a bow. He wasn't a gameplay god, but he knew the basic rule. The guards were getting closer by the second, and Amand had less time to think. All the spectators were giddy with incredible tension. It was very scary, but Amand was ready. If there's a task, there's a way to accomplish it. As long as there was a bow among the weapon options, he raised his bow before him, drawing the bowstring. His eyes were watching with eagle-like scrutiny. He must not miss the slightest detail, and Amand had found this important detail. He stepped back to a safe distance, took aim and threw the arrow. His steel nosed into the ring of the guard's helmet, knocking it off. He made the same motion with the other 2. Now, in front of the archer stood 3 guards, completely unprotected from arrows. But that didn't stop them from attacking. One of them charged at the archer with fury, but Amand's arrow was faster. It pierced his forehead just before he was about to attack. With dexterity, Amand took out the remaining 2 guards, and in a moment only he and Lord Talleyrand remained in the vast throne room. The Lord was amazed and admired his talent at the same time, even though he hated it. He rose from his throne in a slow, languid manner and moved toward the archer. His footsteps were slow and heavy, so that the echoes pressed on his brain. The comments were just exploding with tension. They were waiting for action from Amand. What would this mad genius come up with this time? There was no hinge on the Lord's helmet, so he wouldn't be able to repeat his trick. Amand clutched the bow in his hand painfully. He thought of the method he had devised. The condition of 3 headshots had been fulfilled. Now all that was left to do was to make sure that it was true. A window appeared in front of Amand again. The sequential firing skill was activated. Some viewers had already forgotten that he had such a skill in his arsenal. But why did he need it now? How could it help him? The audience was perplexed, but with bated breath continued to watch, crossing their fingers that their idol would not lose. With this skill, he shot through the stone floor so that many arrows were sticking out from there. They pierced through the stone, but they were easily retrievable. He did this in order to load his bow faster at the most opportune moment. The Lord continued to approach. His menacing and impossibly loud voice told Amand that arrows and bows would not help him. But Amand had it all figured out. He had already found a way to put him down. The archer fired a quick arrow where the Lord's heart should have been. The impact with the iron surface sent sparks flying. The iron armor bore the mark of the arrow at the heart. The arrow itself bounced off and fell to the floor. Talleyrand was unaffected. He continued to make steps toward Amund and did not understand what he was trying to accomplish. He shared his futile threats with him. The Lord was overconfident, but Amund didn't stop. He kept firing arrows one after another into his heart. But they bounced back again, falling to the floor. This was starting to really piss the Lord off. What the hell is he doing? Amund began to accelerate, and now a flock of arrows was flying at the Lord's heart. He clutched 3 more arrows and fired them in the same direction. I should have been faster and more precise. Straight to the heart. Amund threw his arrows with such devilish accuracy that sparks began to fly. There was a slight puff of smoke from the friction. The arrows continued to fly into his heart. When he sensed something wrong, the Lord sped up and ran at the archer with a shout. There wasn't much left. 3 more arrows hit the armor with tremendous force, and the unexpected happened. At the very heart of the Lord's armor, a hole gaped, and the Lord was, at last, completely defenseless before the archer. And when people panic, they don't know what they're doing. He didn't have time to dodge or hide, and the final, decisive arrow pierced his heart. He fell dead before he could say a word. There was silence for a second. And then the chat began to explode with comments from onlookers who were delighted with the archer. He started receiving numerous donations from fans with enthusiastic words. 3 hours of training, then a quest of increasing difficulty. It was exhausting, but the thrill of victory energized Amund again and again. Amund responded to comments from viewers and thanked those who threw him donations, while having a simple, casual conversation with subscribers. In the decisive battle, he fired 40 shots to finally overpower an unrelenting opponent. Subscribers called him pro streamer and truly admired their idol. Some people made a joke about him being born with a silver spoon in that very spot. A joyous Amund was eager to tell Lady Amelia of his victory. He wanted to see her astonished face. Subscribers saw his face full of surprise when user Seojaya sent him a donation of 300,000 won. In the attached post, the user wrote about how awesome he is. This was the same user who sent 1,000,000 won on the last joint stream. Meanwhile, in the subway, the doors opened on the left side, and the girl had to pass through the crowd of people to get out of the carriage. Barely breaking free, a short girl with brown hair wearing a red cap tried to catch her breath. The maddening noise, the crowds. How long did she have to stay like this? The girl walked alone up the steps to the house. Her path was lit by a lonely lantern like her. As she opened the door to the house, she thought about how much she would rather dive into this boundless ocean with not a soul than go against the waves. Cold loneliness and too loud silence greeted her in the apartment. She absent-mindedly removed her outer clothing. Not thinking about food or anything else, the girl ran to the computer in anticipation, leaving her backpack behind. She got there just in time. Amund's stream had just started. She watched him play, marveling at his beauty and incredible talent. Chewing on almonds, she kept her eyes on the monitor. His streamers were the only light in her life. At first she was interested in his nickname, so similar to her favorite nuts. Then she was drawn in as soon as she saw him. On the monitor was the very moment when Lady Amelia was giving Amund his assignment. The assignment itself was pretty creepy. How was it even possible to do it alone? But what was the girl's surprise when she heard Amund accept the task? Was he seriously going to undertake it? The stream continued, and she watched it with bated breath. She rejoiced when Amund was able to enter the castle grounds, worried for him as he tackled the 3 armored guards. Eyes bulging with fear, marveled at how competently and talented he was able to take down one of the strongest bosses in the entire game. Her eyes glistened with joy for her idol. I should have donated. Is it 100,000 won again like usual? No, make it 300,000 won this time. She didn't want to give in to anyone. She'd already spent a lot of money. But this money was an investment in her happiness. After sending the donation, she waited for Amund's reaction. He had it memorized. What would his reaction be? Amund was still reading the comments. Someone in the audience suggested doing a backflip to end the stream. He found it tempting. He decided to do it. Landing on his feet, he was not thrown out. A window appeared that said it was revived at the last save location. I guess he didn't get thrown out by the optimization. Well, he'll have to call it a day. The stream was over. Sang-hyun found himself in reality, trying to catch his breath. His face and shirt were wet with sweat. While wiping himself with a clean towel, Sang-hyun thought to himself, so even if he was destroyed, he wouldn't be thrown out of the game. He was surprised at that, but judging by the audience's reaction, it worked. He earned over 300,000 won in donations, so he was pretty happy with everything. But this Seojaya viewer, wasn't he the one who gave away a cosmic amount of money on the joint stream back then? I wonder what he does for a living. It was a little discouraging. Sang-hyun thought he was still young to be donating such amounts of money to a streamer. It was kind of weird. Sang-hyun wondered if he was being too biased. Although, if the streamer can't accept money, what's it even about? How about a silver spoon? After the end of Amon's stream, the girl, full of happiness, was lying on the floor. The stream was just fiery. She rose abruptly from the floor, thinking she should make a clip of this broadcast. Opening her computer, she spent a long time searching for a track that would fit the clip perfectly. At times like these, the resources of the company she worked for were indispensable. She chose a fairly popular song that everyone should know. She sat down to edit the video. Today was an exciting story and gorgeous visuals. This time it's even cooler than before. If he keeps this up, the girl's music videos will become even more impressive. It was early morning. Sang-hyun slept sweetly in his bed until his phone rang. Not knowing what's going on or who thought to call him this early, he reaches for the phone. It was Kim Joo-hyuk. What did he want at a time like this? Sang-hyun answered the call in a hoarse voice, and Joo-hyuk's cheerful voice sounded on the other end of the phone. Sang-hyun mumbled into the receiver and accidentally dropped it. After collecting himself, he called back. Joo-hyuk called because he wanted to announce a little problem to Sang-hyun. The thing was, that dude, Seojaya, who posted that clip doesn't even read the comments underneath it. Kim Joo-hyuk, as his manager, wrote him in the comments that he wanted to discuss something important. He even left his email. But he has a closed account on Tribe and he doesn't respond. Kim Joo-hyuk told Sang-hyun to ask Seojaya when he would donate again. But Sang-hyun would rather not do that. Then the only option left is to just wait, even if it takes a lot of time. On that note, the guy said goodbye, and Kim Joo-hyuk hung up the phone. Sang-hyun looked puzzledly at his phone. By then, he had already gotten out of bed because he felt he couldn't sleep anymore. His mind was a mess, swarming with a bunch of thoughts. Sang-hyun grabbed a full garbage bag. He decided he'd better get the house in order. Maybe it would help clear his head too. Putting on his jacket, he wandered around his yard with a garbage bag. He didn't notice anything around him. He was too thoughtful, and even the cold morning air and the slight breeze couldn't cheer him up. Every single day he walked those stairs, and still there were times it took his breath away. No, he was tired of complaining. He decided that he would think of it as a kind of training. After all difficulties on our path, they are only temporary until we get used to them. As soon as Sang-hyun took a step off the last step to the flat surface, he was immediately knocked by someone's opening door. Sang-hyun dropped the bags and crouched down, holding his shoulder, which had been nailed by the door. A short girl was coming out of her house. She was staring at her phone, so she didn't immediately realize what had happened. Blaming herself for not paying attention, she approached Sang-hyun, asking if he was hurt. He had his back to her, so she didn't realize who was in front of her right away. Sang-hyun replied that it was okay. He slowly stood up holding his shoulder and finally turned to face her. The girl was dumbfounded and fell silent in surprise, covering her mouth with her hands. Sang-hyun didn't understand what was happening. He asked if she was all right, but the girl couldn't say a word. She couldn't even move from the shock. Shifting from one foot to the other in embarrassment, Sang-hyun grabbed his bags and walked on. When he got to the garbage can, he left 2 garbage bags in it. He had a good sweat, he felt better. At that moment his phone rang, and it was Kim Joo-hyuk again. Sang-hyuk answered with a question asking what was wrong. Kim Joo-hyuk informed him that Seojaya has released a music video again based on Sang-hyun's latest broadcast. That clip was awesome. Just posted, and already 3,000 views, and over 100 comments. The clip was trending at number 78. At this rate, it will get all 200,000 views in less than 24 hours. Kim Joo-hyuk left a message in the comments with their contacts, so it was left to wait again. Sang-hyun hung up the phone after saying goodbye. At that moment, the girl who had slammed the door on him came up behind him. She apologized, trying to catch her breath. Sang-hyun thought he dropped something, but the girl handed him a notebook and pen. She stuttered with excitement and asked him to sign. Sang-hyun didn't understand at first. She must be a fan, he thought. He asked her if she watched his streamers. It was a stupid question, though, because the answer was obvious. He thought he wasn't that famous yet, and then he met a fan right outside his house. It's really happening. A little embarrassed, Sang-hyun took up his pen and notepad, leaving his autograph. He asked with interest what the girl's name was. Her name was Seo-ji-ah. The three guys, Yoo Sang-hyun, Kim Joo-hyuk, and Seo-ji-ah, were sitting at a table in a cafe in the city. Joo-hyuk was dressed in a decent suit. His hair was neatly styled with gel. He handed the girl his business card. While drinking a Coke, he asked her about her life. Turns out video editing is kind of her day job. The girl was very nervous, so she didn't even know what to say or how to behave. She didn't even touch the drink. Kim Joo-hyuk said they've been looking for her for a long time. Who knew they would meet by chance like this? The manager pulled several sheets of documents out of his briefcase and held them out to Seo-ji-ah. He offered her to work with them. Meanwhile, Sang-hyun was thinking how and when only Kim Joo-hyuk had time to prepare all this. He immediately called him as soon as he heard her name. Seo-ji-ah questioned with a puzzled expression. Kim Joo-hyuk immediately realized that she was hesitating. You could see it in her eyes. The manager kept talking. The thing was that the videos she posted had some monetization problems. Problems with copyrights, use of content. And the fan channels could not generate income in principle. What was the guy's surprise when the girl said that her videos were not made for profit at all? He suggested that she make videos together, and then the money would come in. Seo-ji-ah took a sip of the cold cola thoughtfully and without words. Usually, when cooperation is offered, everyone is only interested in money, but she didn't seem to care at all. So her goal wasn't money at all? Honestly speaking, Joo-hyuk thought she was some kind of major at first. But then she sent those fat donations out of fan love for Almond, and he's making the video out of sheer enthusiasm. Well, if that's the case, Joo-hyuk suddenly had an idea. He said that Almond needed the help of an editor, specifically Seo-ji-ah. Yoo Sang-hyun looked at his friend in bewilderment, not understanding what he was up to. But everything was according to plan. Seo-ji-ah was confused and asked again. Did he need her? She couldn't believe it. Kim Joo-hyuk continued to speak. She had no idea how long Sang-hyun had been looking for her. He poked Sang-hyun in the side. The man confirmed. Sang-hyun spoke up. He said that she could edit the video in her own style as she liked best. He really needed her help. Seo-ji-ah's cheeks flushed red with embarrassment. How long had it been since the last time someone had told her that they needed her? She had always faced disrespect and dislike in her direction. Was it really true now? She asked for some time to think hard about their proposal. It was excellent, but Seo-ji-ah suddenly became quiet and began to speak in a low voice. The problem was that double contracts were forbidden where Seo-ji-ah was working at the time. To officially become Sang-hyun's editor, she has to quit her job. But she has to live on something, and the paycheck at the company was pretty good. So relying on video income alone was too risky for her. She needed the guys to pay her a fixed salary. Sang-hyun clenched his hand into a fist under the table with excitement. He bent over to Joo-hyuk, suggesting that he should hang on to it. He'd only been streaming for a week and couldn't even buy Joo-hyuk a drink, let alone pay an editor's salary. But Joo-hyuk didn't even bat an eye. He opened his briefcase and took out some documents. He was sent an offer from Punk. The terms included payment for the editor's work. Sang-hyun almost choked on his Coke when he heard that. He couldn't believe that a company as big as Punk wanted to cooperate with him. After a brief moment of thought, Seo-ji-ah agreed to sign the contract. The guys were thrilled with what they heard. It was a question of livelihood, so it was worth thinking it over. But she didn't seem to mind the contract from the start. She was sick of working at that company. So that's how it is. The contract will pay her a base salary of 25 million won a year, plus 40% of the income from Altube as a bonus. Of course, it was possible to just split the entire income in half without a fixed rate, but Seo-ji-ah was more comfortable with a fixed salary. The girl signed the contract. After that, they discussed few important issues for some more time, then went outside. At the entrance of the cafe, they stopped. Kim Joo-hyuk informed her that he would contact her as soon as he got a response from Punk. She also asked what would happen to the videos she posted on her channel. Most likely, they will have to be uploaded to the main channel. After saying goodbye, Cog went to one side of the street while the two guys left in the other direction. As soon as the girl distanced herself, Sang-hyun immediately asked if that offer of cooperation was for real. He still couldn't believe that such a well-known company wanted to cooperate with him. The terms of the contract were too good to refuse. Walking quietly through the streets of the city, the friends discussed the successful meeting they had just had. This Miss Cog was really meticulous and straightforward. Since she was a fan of Almond, Ju Hyuk thought it would be easy to convince her. But it's one thing to be a fan, and quite another to work side by side with your idol. But still, if she was donating such huge sums, then she really did like Almond a lot. She seemed too cold and serious to Sang-hyun during the meeting. If you think about it, she didn't smile once while they were talking. But none of that mattered. They had to get her. Since she was such a professional, Cog had just reached her house. After closing the door, she slid down the wall. Then, snapping out of it, she stripped off her outer clothing at the speed of light and threw herself on the bed. She covered herself completely with the blanket, hiding her head as well. It was hard to believe. To see Almond live was beyond reality, and to be his editor was unimaginable. But it wasn't a dream. She pulled out her contract, which was proof that she'd pulled out. The words that had once hurt her badly right in the heart popped up in her mind. What can a college graduate do? What will she do when she leaves here? Did she really think she'd be treated anywhere else as well as she was here? And she already thought she'd be stuck in that nightmare forever. She couldn't believe she was finally being appreciated. Cog opened her phone and went into the comments under her latest video. All those warm words, admiration and encouragement warmed her heart. It was a strange feeling, previously unknown to her. When Sang-hyun returned to his apartment, the first thing he thought to do was to start streaming. Kneading his right hand, he thought about the fact that his stream schedule should be fine now that he was doing it every day. The moment he had already settled into the capsule, he received a message from Coga. She had sent him a video and music for a screensaver. They literally just broke up. How did she do it already? But Coga said she didn't work on it in one sitting, but edited it gradually. Yu Sang-hyun was already eager to see what this extremely talented girl could do if she took it seriously. Almond began the broadcast. At that moment, his viewers received a notification. Some were sitting at home, some were having coffee with a friend, and some were at a gambling club. Everyone immediately rushed to watch their idol's new broadcast. The chat literally began to blaze at once, and the online traffic was growing by the second. Almond's new splash screen came on, which delighted the viewers, and they immediately guessed that it was Seojaya's handiwork. More than 1,000 spectators had already arrived. Almond finally greeted them. He thanked Ruby Sword, Eggplant and others for donating and decided to go straight into Kingdom Age. Almond found himself in the same place where he had finished the game last time, right at the entrance to the castle. The bodies were still there. They acted as a reminder that he had taken this castle alone. I had to report everything to Amelia. But first, since Almond had cleared the place alone, I might as well take a few necessities with me. Walking around the various rooms in the castle, Almond changed his bow, grabbed some gold, and found a new archer's garment that fit him perfectly. It was impossible to get more items under the limit, so Almond left the castle. He went towards the castle where Lady Amelia lived. When Almond reached the beautiful large white stone castle, it was already dawn. Fortunately, time in the game was not the same as in reality. Someone called out to Almond. He turned at the sound and saw the beautiful Amelia peering out of the gold-patterned carriage. He walked up to the carriage and bowed obediently to the lady. She certainly hadn't expected to see him so early. Almond came to report on the completion of the task. Milady frowned suddenly. She wanted to speak to him alone, so she ordered the servants out of the carriage for a few minutes. Then the lady called Almond into one of the rooms of her castle. Almond had finished his task too quickly, had he changed his mind, but Almond told her that her errand had been completed. Amelia could not believe it. After all, it had only been 2 days since she had given him that assignment. Archer explained that it took 1 day to get there and back, half a day to prepare for the raid, and another half a day for the raid itself. She couldn't believe it. She looked into Almond's eyes and asked again about the raid. He explained that Tolerance guards were too much and he had to eliminate every last one of them. Amelia's face twisted in surprise. Her eyes bulged, and her lips curled into a tube. The comments were exploding with jokes from viewers about Amelia's reaction. Some of them have already parsed these moments into memes. Lady Amelia regained her composure and returned to her normal appearance. She coughed softly, as befitted a proper lady. Amand wanted to tell her that Taloranta Castle was now standing empty. He confirmed that there wasn't a single living soul left in the castle. Amelia's azure eyes looked at him with amazement and admiration. He had single-handedly managed to capture the impregnable castle of Talorant. Then there was no reason to delay even a moment. In order to protect the innocent people, they must immediately annex these lands to Jeanneret's territory. Amelia gave orders to prepare the carriage. They were to leave for Taloranta Castle immediately. We need to get there before the other greedy nobles get their hands on it. The subject obediently bowed to her, saying that he would prepare everything she needed in a moment. Before settling into the carriage, the lady bade her faithful servant farewell, thanking her for her service. Amand stood in the street, immersed in his distant thoughts. Amelia turned and addressed him. She gently told the archer to take a seat beside her. She had a great many questions for him. The audience was perplexed. Doesn't such a warm attitude appear only when maximum favor is attained? It turns out that capturing a castle also significantly increases the level of favorability. The carriage moved from its place. Soon it left its native land. Amand and Amelia sat across from each other, making small talk. The lady asked him many questions. For example, how could he be such a powerful warrior? Amand tried to brush it off, saying he wasn't that strong. But Amelia was completely serious. She has seen many valiant knights in her life, but none of them can match Amand's level of skill. Amand was quite skilled at archery. But could that skill alone take out all the knights in the castle? His skills truly amazed my lady. She had never seen a knight who relied solely on his bow. Amand corrected her. He wasn't a knight at all, but a simple mercenary. She squeezed her hand and looked at him as if she wanted to say something important. She asked if he had ever considered becoming a knight after the current assignment was done. They were in urgent need of a trustworthy man to run Talorant Castle when they annexed the lands. She corrected that she was asking out of pure curiosity, and the chat room was in an uproar. Did Amelia's storyline even have this line of events? Were such events available in principle? Or is there a way for the player to become a knight as well? Everyone was curious as to what Amand's answer would be. But he chose a rather boring answer. He said he was just a mercenary. Why would he become a knight? But Emily persisted. She said that her father wished to meet Amand in person. He seemed to be quite pleased with how deftly Amand had resolved the recent, very difficult situation. Amand became agitated upon hearing this. The Count? But he left right after he gave Amelia's orders, and before he could say anything, Amelia gently placed a finger to his lips, gently silencing him. She continued to say, "To ignore such things is to show respect towards a noble lady." By this time the carriage had arrived at the right place, and there were a lot of people in the castle, putting everything in order. A huge gate opened and Jeanneret's men and Amand entered the castle grounds. Talorant's subjects thought they were his envoys, but Amelia denied this, introducing herself as a member of the Jeanneret family, and the subjects ascended the stone dais where the Lord usually made his announcements. Behind them was the banner of Talorant. The people of Talorant looked at this with incomprehension. They were still confused and bewildered. Amelia turned to the stone wall on which hung the banner marking Talorant's territory. After exchanging glances with Amand, she confidently pulled down that banner, and a new, golden banner bearing the crest of Jeanneret took its place. It meant the beginning of a new life for all these poor people that were obliged to serve Talorant for the rest of their lives. The people opened their mouths in surprise. The Lord changed overnight? It's kind of a little disappointing, but they decided to continue with their duties. It was rumored that Jeanneret was much more intelligent in managing the lands. Is it okay to just leave things as they are? Shouldn't people know who they have to serve from now on? But Amelia promised him that everything would be fine, smiling sweetly. Soon people would get used to it. A full week of game time had passed. The castle had been completely cleaned up. Now it didn't look so intimidating and lonely. The inhabitants of this territory, who were previously mired in unsustainable debts, now have the opportunity to pay off their bills with their honest labor. Those once on the verge of being sold into slavery were allowed to get a certain amount of money for themselves to live on. The labor force naturally increased and the once lifeless, dying area began to slowly come back to life. This is likely to be much more rewarding and prosperous. Amon stood in the bedroom by the large window, gazing thoughtfully out over the castle grounds. The beautiful Emilia came up behind him, gently grasping his strong, manly shoulder. The audience immediately suspected something wrong. What was that strange, unusual atmosphere between them? They held hands sweetly and looked into each other's eyes. Emilia reminded him of the upcoming meeting with her father tomorrow. Amon was just thinking about what a sweet, happy ending this would be, when suddenly they heard the guards blowing a trumpet. It was the sound of alarm. Looking into the distance, a huge army led by an intimidating commander could be seen approaching the castle. Could it be Talleyrand's allies that have come to take the castle back? Amon said with confidence that he would be able to stop them. His voice sounded determined and manly. Emilia grabbed his hand and, almost crying, begged him to be more careful. He made his promise. It soothed the burning pain in her heart a little. No more than half an hour later, Jeanneret's army stood outside Talleyrand Castle, waiting for the enemies. The golden banners of their family towered over their heads. Roman shouted for his orders to be heard by every warrior. Today they were to stand to the end, defending Talleyrand Castle. For Lady Jeanneret, who graciously took them all into her service. They were bound to win this war. Amon found Emilia's gaze looking down at him from the top of the tower. That gaze had everything in it. No words were needed for them to understand each other. A window with a new task appeared in front of Amon. He had to win the war. Each of Jeanneret's warriors was ready to fight to the end. They were determined. Raising their weapons toward him, they shouted, showing their readiness. Now that was some real kingdom age. In the comments, the guys were discussing Amon's accomplishments in this game. The epitome of tenacity. Couldn't pull that off in a game. Amon could do what Bubblegum couldn't. Upon seeing these comments, Amon politely asked viewers to be more tactful and not mention other streamers on his broadcast. Talleyrand's army was closing in. The tension was all too evident. It was literally in the air. The spectators watched with bated breath. Amon suddenly announces that he has decided to wrap up the stream at this point for the day. The audience was definitely not thrilled. Who even stops the stream at such an important and exciting moment? Thanking the audience for being with him today, Amon ended the broadcast. He left them wondering what was going to happen next. A while later, he was already lying on the bed, resting. With his phone in his hands, Sang-hyun decided to read the comments on his latest stream. Judging from the audience's reaction, Sang-hyun picked a good moment to end the broadcast. They couldn't wait for the moment Amon returned to finally find out what was going to happen next. Amon created a successful suspense. He simply followed Acorn Jelly's advice. According to him, it is very important to choose when to end the game. Even though it may disappoint viewers, it's much healthier in the long run. Sang-hyun continued to leaf through all sorts of forums with interest. There were quite a few interesting posts. What was one of the posts about Emilia's reaction with a photo of her funny facial expression attached? Sang-hyun made it to the comments where viewers praised his skill. How did he manage to get through so much in a few days? It was strange about the whole thing. Sang-hyun didn't fully understand. Was his game really that difficult? He may not be an average player, but a pro archer could definitely get to his level. Didn't pro archers play Kingdom Age? Sang-hyun suddenly remembered Acorn Jelly's words. He had said that Sang-hyun's ability to concentrate was incredible. Maybe Sang-hyun had a talent for playing virtual reality games? Was it because of his high concentration? But even though archery really required high concentration, it doesn't mean that only archers have this skill. Sang-hyun continued leafing through the posts and came across an analysis of Amon's archery skills. There were precise descriptions of how he shot. In great detail, I assumed a pose similar to that of a professional archer. The bowstring was exactly at lip level. His right hand, the moment he releases the bowstring, doesn't tremble one bit and remains in the same position. The man who described it is also an archery enthusiast. But, judging by the post, he was no mere amateur. Sang-hyun suddenly tensed up and began to read all of his posts more carefully. Recognizing that he was a former archer, Sang-hyun raised himself from the bed. If he was an archer, Sang-hyun probably knew him. Suddenly a wave of sadness came over him. He left the phone, sighing heavily. Why was he thinking about this? There was nothing interesting about it. Everyone who was involved in archery had cut ties with him about 10 years ago. But he still wondered if he knew him, too. He retired from the sport because of an injury he sustained in that accident. Other than his coach, no one else knows about it. The boy closed his eyes, overcome by memories from the past. As he walked through the city, sad as he was, he didn't even look around. Suddenly someone called out to him. He turned around, seeing a pretty girl. She was just furious. With incredible anger, she asked if it was true that Sang-hyun was going to drop everything. With fake boredom, the young man replied that he was no longer interested. Is it really just entertainment for him? The girl thought. If Sang-hyun won't shoot archery, who will? I mean, he knew everyone was looking up to him. And he says he's quitting because it's no longer fun. But he was serious. At least the girl didn't notice the sadness and pain in his eyes. With tears in her eyes, she turned and walked away. As he walked away, young Sang-hyun dropped a few tears. It was the end, and it was too hard for him. Tearing himself away from the sad memories, Sang-hyun decided to distract himself with sports. He quickly pulled on some suitable clothes and jumped outside. On the way, he checked the comments. Subscribers could not wait for a new stream. There were a couple negative comments, but while he didn't have many viewers, he even appreciated them. As he was walking down the stairs, he suddenly saw Seoji coming out of the house and called out to her. She was going to play sports too. Sang-hyun offered to go together, to which the girl was surprised but couldn't refuse. It just so happened that she had something to show him. After running for about an hour, the guys decided to stop by the lake. Sang-hyun bought some cold water and they sat down together on a bench. He reminded her that she wanted to show him something. She pulled out her phone, holding it out to him. She'd finished editing some videos for the new channel. Sang-hyun was just thrilled with the video. His reaction and compliments embarrassed Seoji. She didn't even know where to put herself because of her excitement. Sang-hyun continued to watch. It was a video about his very first stream. The shots changed quite quickly to match the pace of the shooting, giving the viewer no time to get bored. And Sang-hyun was also catching the added pleasure of watching the chat room's reactions. It was just crazy. After finishing the video, Seoji asked if he liked it. Full of seriousness, replied that the video was a masterpiece. He was impressed, so cut up the daytime stream, including all the highlights. The graphics that Seoji added to make it easy for new viewers to experience were also on par. A sense of speed, a reasonable amount of chat inserts, and just the perfect ending to the video. Blushing as red as a tomato from embarrassment, the girl thanked him. But she couldn't post the video yet. Seoji heard that it would be better to have 3 or 4 videos posted at a time. The guys also agreed that she would continue to edit videos in this format. About an hour later, the guys went their separate ways. Seoji went home. Lying on the bed, she felt completely exhausted and terribly tired. So much so that she couldn't even change her clothes. She thought back to today's meeting with Sang-hyun. He liked her work. What could be better than that? Thinking about him gave her butterflies in her stomach. The feeling of being recognized. It felt so good. She closed her eyes, basking in her dreams and thoughts of him. Suddenly she got a notification on her phone. Someone had written. Normally no one should be writing at this time. She got worried. Was it really Amand? And she opened her phone in anticipation. But all her good mood suddenly evaporated when she saw who had written. She suddenly had an emergency. She had to take a shower, and there were so many things to do. She just dropped the phone and got out of bed. The message was from a contact written down as scum. Amand has a highly anticipated fight tonight. The audience was filled with goosebumps of anticipation. The first ever epic battle of a lone archer. Subscribers in the chat room were discussing it. Some said they would watch the stream after school, some on their way home. They had sparks flying from their eyes. A notification is sent to all subscribers. Amand was starting his stream. It was the most pleasant surprise. Amand started his broadcast 4 hours early. He's a freak. But even though most people were busy, they still wouldn't miss the stream. His face appeared on the screens of thousands of fans. They were dreaming of this long-awaited moment. Amand said hello to his audience. He was a little apprehensive about the time, but the crowd was even bigger than yesterday. It's a hell of a start. Amand explained to fans the reason why he started the stream early. It was about the upcoming epic battle. She was probably going to take a lot of time. None of the audience minded, they were too happy. Well, it was about time for this legendary battle to begin. The chat was exploding with supportive comments. Amand found himself in the same place where the stream ended last time. It was a field. Suddenly he was approached by Roman, who was behind him. Amand made his way from the bottom of the tower. Roman pointed to the tower where the beautiful Emilia stood, smiling slyly. Amand tried to brush it off, saying they were only friends, but Roman interrupted him. He'd seen it all and understood it all perfectly. He gave the archer a friendly pat on the shoulder, saying he envied him. He smiled too sweetly at Amand. It turns out he has so many things mixed up in him. But no one who had previously gone through this game had ever noticed it before, because he was always angry with them. So Roman had a storyline too. Amand wondered. Roman had been kind to him before, but they hadn't had that kind of mental intimacy. Roman continued to talk. Thanks to Amand, he had gained a lot. Now he could stand shoulder to shoulder with him. Roman called Amand captain. It was time to go on the attack. But before that could happen, Roman said something important to Amand. He pointed at the enemy army with his hand, spotting the golden-helmeted warrior who was the commander. He was the key to winning today's battle. But it didn't look like he was raring to go. He was the kind of man who only commanded by tucking his rear end away. Amand's job was to get to him. The trumpet sounded, signaling the beginning of the decisive battle. When they heard it, the soldiers of Jinret rushed into battle, ready to reclaim their land. With their spears drawn, they roared forward to victory. At this moment Amand was commanding the archers. After his command, the army of arrows took to the air, searching for their target. And they found them. Several dozen enemies fell. A window appeared in front of Amand, announcing that the troops would enter the battle automatically. He turned to the audience. The task itself seemed easy to him. But then he received a donation from Napoleon with a message. He was willing to donate 10,000 won to Amand for each warrior stack. It was very sudden. He did not know what to say or how to behave in such a case. He wasn't sure that everything would go smoothly, but to the delight of the viewers, he accepted the challenge. His followers wished him success and good luck. Amand was no longer on the battlefield. He had retreated quite far away to the left flank. He had a crazy idea. Everything was visible as if in the palm of his hand. The confident words of the onlooker who had given him the task only made the people more excited. It was clear that Amand would have to fulfill this treacherous task of his. As Acorn Jelly said, donations on broadcasts are an unpredictable thing. That's why every penny is worth its weight in gold. He had somewhere around 80 arrows. If he managed to take out the same number of enemies, he would easily get almost 1,000,000 won. Such donation tasks had their own specificity. They have a very strong influence on the speed of the characters pumping. And it wasn't just about destroying the enemy ringleader, but also the protracted battles that would spiral the traffic on the streamer. The enemies were advancing, but suddenly, one of them was suddenly hit by an arrow that came out of nowhere. Someone noticed that the attack was from the left, but they didn't understand exactly what the issue was. One of the commanders shouted that they had no time to be distracted by every arrow. The commander gave the order to move on, but at that moment an arrow found his head. There was a real panic. This can't be happening. The troops were trying to figure out where exactly they were being shot at. At that moment Amand was preparing his next arrow. Now it was clear why he had gone there alone. He must have tracked the trajectory of the arrow when he hit the bullseye. As he fired a couple more arrows, the enemies finally realized what the archer was shooting from the bushes to the southwest. One of the commanders ordered 24 troops to go to defend the left flank. Amand counted his arrows as the enemy troops approached his bushes. The arrows were 20 and so were the troops. He prepared arrows and started shooting at once. Each one of them hit right on the heads. One of the troops shouted to defend their heads, but an arrow found him. There were 3 seconds left before the sequential firing skill was disabled. The remaining troops were fleeing for reinforcements. There were 2 seconds left. The enemies fell one by one before they could even take a step towards their army. 1 second to go. The last enemy was taken down by Amand's nimble arrow. In total, he had already shot 230,000 won. That was incredible. I prepared 20 arrows and used exactly the same amount to take down all the enemies. Amon's broadcast was followed by Coga. Sitting in front of her computer monitor, she held her fists for him. She was in awe of him. He was amazing. Now it was clear to her why everyone liked him so much, because no matter what, he always gave his best in whatever he did. This love comes from his unwavering self-confidence. He never doubted himself. His conviction was not based on blind faith, but on real results. And it was undoubtedly the image of true genius that people admire. An endless amount of donations flew in for Amon, and the chat was being summoned from comments with words of admiration. 40 exterminations in a row. The chat room joked that Amon was just ruthless. Mass extermination. Amon had about 40 arrows left. He received a donation from Shinapolian that begged for mercy. Who knew Amon would gain 400,001 so quickly? The enemy leader was perplexed. It was unimaginable. One single archer had killed all 20 of them. He gave the order to send 40 knights forward. They were no longer to let him destroy their men with impunity. 40 knights were tearing towards the bushes where Amon was. Shinapolian sent the donut again, begging for it all to stop. But it was too late. Shinapolian had at least 1 million in their account to give such an assignment, so there was nothing to whine about. In that case, confidently decided Amon, he would take that 1,000,001 for himself. He confidently grasped his bow, struck a pose, and began to fire the arrows that so easily found the heads of his enemies. They fell one by one. The commander ordered us to hold formation. Amon activated the sequential firing skill just then. The battle continued. Poor Shinapolian. All he had to do was sadly watch his money go, and there was nothing he could do about it. Arrows started coming from the enemy side as well. Amon lost concentration. He was moving, and that risked compromising his accuracy. He looked for the enemy archer with panic. He saw an arrow coming straight at him and released his own sharply. His arrow deflected the enemy arrow. Meanwhile, Shinapolian suddenly realized that he was doomed. Amon continued to fire his arrows. There were almost a dozen troops left. He already had 710,001 in his account. And that number kept growing and growing. One of the troops grabbed his sword and rushed at Amon. He was too close, but Amon got him down in time. Who the hell was he? How could he shoot at that speed? Thought one of the knights. He began to simply run away at an unimaginable speed. Amon was about to put him down in a raid, but he suddenly found that he had run out of arrows. At that moment Shinapolian exhaled in relief. But Amon wasn't going to give up. He had an idea. The knight kept running, thinking he had broken away. But when he turned around to check it, he was horrified to see Amon running after him. He screamed with terror. His reaction was so alive, as if it were real. Catching up with the enemy, Amon grabbed one arrow, which he used to finish off one of the enemy knights. Pulling the bowstring, he shot and hit the head. The last of the 40 knights was struck. The mission given to Shinapolian was accomplished perfectly, and he sent Amon a whole 1,000,001. It was mind-boggling. Amon thanked him politely for the donation. That was the end of it. The war had been won. The Genarets had reclaimed their land. By the time Amon approached his army, the knights were cheerfully shouting the name of one of them. One of the knights said that it was because of Sir Robert that they won the war. He is truly a remarkable man. Amon opened his mouth in surprise. What was that just now? People in the comments were also perplexed. Why would they call Robert an undisputed war hero when Amon was? Ignorant fools. Amon did all the hard work. Amon had slaughtered 100 enemies by himself, but no one seemed to notice. Amon was suddenly tense. An angry Roman approached him. He apologized for the outrageous behavior of the knights. The way they treat valiant mercenaries is appalling. Amon was puzzled. Was there a problem? Roman explained the whole situation to the archer. The knights tell the mercenaries to take all their measly base pay and fuck off. This despite the fact that they made a crucial contribution to the victory. But what did the knights themselves do for this victory? Practically nothing. Roman was too upset. At that moment Robert approached them. He sat arrogantly on his horse and regarded the archer from on high. He wondered what was wrong with taking honestly earned money and walking away. Roman angrily replied that there was clearly a clause in there about additional rewards for outstanding performance. Robert didn't understand anything. Outstanding results? From some mercenaries out there? What kind of contribution could pathetic mercenaries make on a battlefield where noble knights fought to the death? Robin continued. He said the mercenaries fought solely to save their worthless hides, and claimed it was the one and only value the mercenaries had. Roman was so angry at these words that he lost his temper. He turned red with anger, and a vein appeared on his forehead. It was a blatant insult. Robin laughed in his face. He literally didn't think he was human, mocking him and the rest of the mercenaries. Robin accused mercenaries of only worrying about their own skin in battle. This was a fairly common stereotype of mercenaries. However, it was only a stereotype. If the Nemniks acted only like that, they would have no credibility. And without it, their community would not last long. Roman did not relent. The knights hung the fight on them because they recognized their skills. But all their appreciation vanished as soon as the fight was over. That wasn't very honorable. When he heard that, Robin was really angry. How dare an ordinary mercenary talk like that? Roman points to Amund, saying that he single-handedly took out a whole 100, and they dare to claim that mercenaries only think about themselves and do nothing. Robin only grinned. A whole 100? All by himself? He raised a laugh at that. His reaction was picked up by the other knights. A real riot started in the comments. Roman seemed to be the most offended, though he tried to keep his temper. He clenched his hand into a fist. Roman had just begun his speech when the enemy leader appeared in the field. The one with the golden helmet turned out to be a woman. This person was arrogant even in this. She was just given a hand, and she brushed it off like that. Amund was suddenly surprised when he saw her. She approached Robin, recognizing her defeat. Their castle had been occupied without trial and the soldiers ruthlessly annihilated. Is this how Jeanret decides things? The man in the golden helmet must be influential, judging by Robin's shrinking face. Robin pathetically tried to justify himself by mentioning the way Talorant treated people, but she interrupted him. She said to call Lady Jeanret to speak to her. But then Amund intervened. He said it wouldn't work. The man in the golden helmet turned to him. What do you mean it won't work? But when she saw him, she froze. She took a few steps towards him, asking who he was. If he wasn't a knight of Jeanret, then who was? Roman introduced him as a mercenary. She grinned bitterly and asked if it was the same mercenary who had killed the 100. Robin and the other knights opened their mouths in surprise and disbelief. But how did she know? Being recognized by an enemy commander is such an honor. So she knew him from the beginning. Robin coughed awkwardly. This was too much even for a joke. Can a mercenary archer who hides behind other people's backs single-handedly destroy 100 soldiers? The man in the golden helmet snorted unhappily. Not an ounce of faith in the obvious. What kind of idiots are these knights? She suddenly turned to Amund again. Did he still want to work for them? Talking, she began to remove her helmet. Did he really want to work for people who couldn't even appreciate his abilities? The comments suspected something wrong. That voice sounded eerily familiar. Then she continued it would be better if he worked for her. And at last she showed her beautiful face. The commentators recognized her as Rosnita, but they were puzzled. Rosnita, and already in this scene, a window with a rather complicated choice appeared in front of Amund again. There were only two options except Rosnita's proposal, or to refuse since he had sworn allegiance to the other. Rosnita was the second key character in this game. That poise and grace despite the defeat. A threatening yet mesmerizing aura, different from Emilia's. Even for a newcomer to Kingdom Age, it was obvious how much effort the developers put into this character. It seemed that even the Knights of Jeanret were completely enchanted by her. They couldn't take their eyes off her. The chat room was in an uproar. After reading a few comments, Amund realized that he had to choose between Emilia and Rosnita. He hesitantly pointed his finger at the first icon, choosing Emilia. It was just a story in the game anyway, not in the real world. With Emilia, Amund was familiar from the beginning. He progressed on her missions. Rosnita grudgingly asked how much longer was he going to keep her waiting. In the comments, half were in favor of Emilia, the other half were in favor of Rosnita. It was all driving Amund crazy. A sweat appeared on his forehead and his finger quivered. Quite unexpectedly for all viewers, Amund announced that he was ending his broadcast. Kim Joo-hyuk was watching the broadcast closely. And when the broadcast ended, he studied the comments. The chat was bursting with comments. Mostly there were too many haters. You can't do without a dose of haters. Weren't these written by the same individuals who logged on to the broadcast before the game even started? They're called fanatics. They're obsessed with being the first to get on the stream. Not only are they swearing, but they're also spreading the events of the last stream to various communities. So Ju Hyuk was grateful to them. What a lot of fanatics there were. The fanbase is mostly made up of men in their 20s and 30s, but here there was an equal mix of both genders. Guys donate more often, but girls more densely, so that in the end, the main profit is from them. However, the sample is small, so it is too early to judge. Kim Ju Hyuk was leafing through the streamers and thought, maybe with these stats it would be better to play a game from Punk? Ju Hyuk heard a painfully familiar voice, and his heart jumped at his heels in fear. It was his angry father bursting into his room. Ju Hyuk's mom tried to calm him down, but it was impossible. He was furious and was literally steaming. His father was told by the director of the company where Ju Hyuk used to work that his son had quit. His father yelled at him and he couldn't say anything back. His father only cared about his reputation. He yelled for Kim Ju Hyuk to come back to the company to work tomorrow morning. Ju Hyuk wanted to object, but he couldn't. He lowered his head and said that he would do what his father said. His father flew out of the room without answering anything. Ju Hyuk was approached by his sweet mother, offering him an apple to eat. He said it's okay. He would make it on his own, he just had to wait a little longer. It's been a week already. Kim Ju Hyuk didn't make a fortune. He didn't achieve anything great, but he liked what he was doing. He saw a bright spot. He wasn't dreaming, was he? This is too much for a simple dream. Kim Ju Hyuk took off his glasses, wiping away his tears. It was 5 in the morning. At this time, Yoo Sang-hyun was sleeping sweetly in his home, watching beautiful dreams. But someone interrupted that by knocking loudly on his door. Sleepy and barely able to stand on his feet, Sang-hyun walked toward the door, muttering something to himself. He was very angry, just furious. Who would think of calling this early in the morning? But when Sang-hyun suddenly heard his friend's voice, his drowsiness disappeared. He came to his senses and immediately opened the door. A panting Kim Ju Hyuk appeared in front of him. He told his friend that he had left home. On the table was a box of mouth-watering chicken thighs in batter with 2 cans of beer. Yoo Sang-hyun and Kim Ju Hyuk were sitting at a table eating. Ju Hyuk ordered drinks for the two, but it appeared that Sang-hyun didn't drink, especially before the stream. It wasn't a problem for Hyuk. He took and gulped down 2 beers. This amused Sang-hyun, but suddenly he became serious. He asked his friend why he had suddenly moved away from his parents. Sure, many moved away from their parents as they got older, but the question was why now? Kim Ju Hyuk suddenly became very quiet. It was a long explanation. He promised that he would tell me everything later. At that moment, he asked if he could stay here. He should have asked before coming here, but still, Sang-hyun said yes. There was enough room for 2 in his apartment, especially since Kim Ju Hyuk is his loyal friend. The guys continued munching on their food, talking about their own things. Suddenly Ju Hyuk asked what Sang-hyuk was going to do in Kingdom Age. Amon seems to have a love triangle looming, and urgently needs to choose between Amelia and Rosnita. Sang-hyun asked, is it so important to pick someone? It's just a game, you can do whatever you want. But Kim Ju Hyuk was definitely not ready to hear that. Everyone is talking about Amelia or Rosnith on the forums. And if you choose at random, you can run into a big war and non-acceptance by subscribers. Why do you have to react so violently? But Kim Ju Hyuk intervened again, bringing him back to reality. If Ju Hyuk were in Hyung's shoes, he wouldn't be able to sleep a wink after reading all those threats. Is the athlete's brain different or something? Sang-hyun turned to his friend with a question. Given his progress, it looks like the Kingdom Age finale is just around the corner. And they still haven't chosen which game to play next. Sipping his soft drink. It would be nice to find something spectacular to get views. Kim Ju Hyuk knew his friend would ask this and was prepared. He devoted an entire study to this question. With anticipation, Kim Ju Hyuk announced to his friend the new game he was to play after this one. It was called Battle Rage. Sang-hyun had heard the name many times, but he had never had the chance to play it yet. Battle Rage is an online survival PvP where players fight each other in real time. The ultimate goal is to be the only 1 out of 100 players to stay alive using different weapons. Good aiming and reaction is the key to winning this game. Kim Joo-hyuk said that this game fits best with Yu Sang-hyun's style and general tendencies, but Sang-hyun wasn't completely sure about it. He wasn't used to playing PvP games. He asked if he should practice a little before the stream, but Joo-hyuk was adamantly against it. There was no way he should have practiced beforehand. Sang-hyun was completely clueless as to what exactly his viewer was eager to see. He assumed it was effective gameplay, but Joo-hyuk corrected him. Anyone can stream effective gameplay if they're skillful enough. He said his viewers are waiting to see unrivaled genius. Joo-hyuk thought back to his friend's very first Kingdom Age stream. He performed incredibly well the first time, even though he hadn't practiced playing it before. The audience goes crazy for true geniuses, so Joo-hyuk thought he'd be better off repeating the same trick, showing a perfect game without practicing. Sang-hyun thought to himself, isn't Battle Rage a game that's all about weapons? And he doesn't know anything about weapons. He's never held anything but a bow. How can you succeed with complete ignorance of game mechanics? But Joo-hyuk didn't stop. After all, Sang-hyun had hit the heads of the enemies who rode on horseback. Who else was capable of aiming so perfectly at the head of a moving target? If it were that simple, he wouldn't be admired by thousands of people. Compared to the others, Amond is a miracle genius. But Sang-hyun reminded his friend that he only plays so well because of the simulated training program where he practices before streaming. These programs came with the capsule. The software is really well optimized, and Sang-hyun is running on the highest difficulty every day. Sang-hyun's record was somewhere around 12,000 points. Joo-hyuk logged into this program through his phone, and his jaw dropped. The simulator said that Sang-hyun was in first place. His optimization code was hovering at the top at number 1. A joyful Joo-hyuk asked his friend to recognize him as right. It wasn't just about archery. Sang-hyun was a genius in that field. Joo-hyuk offered to sign up for Battle Rage, and Yu Sang couldn't get over the fact that he was in first place. A few hours later, Sang-hyun climbed into the pod. He wanted to start the stream. Lately, he's been experiencing which time period has the most views. Kim Joo-hyuk thought the idea was very clever. He wished his friend good luck. But Sang-hyun thought it was too snotty, which made Joo-hyuk angry. Streaming started. Amond was on the same field as last time. He had to make the hardest choice. He froze. Rosnita hastened his answer. She looked at him sternly, expectantly, keeping her eyes on him. Amond's choice depended on the further turn of the plot. In that case, he replied that he was honored by Rosnita's offer. However, even though he was a mercenary, he had already sworn allegiance to another. In the chat room, people were divided into two camps. Some were crazy happy, while others were disappointed. Rosnita smiled arrogantly. He was better than any knight she had ever met. The girl proudly turned around and began to walk away, surrounded by several knights that served as guards. If Amond had chosen Rosnita, the storyline would have taken much longer to develop, and he needed to change the game sooner rather than later. But also, he was truly devoted to his beautiful Lady Amelia. Suddenly, my lady's gentle voice came from behind him. Amond turned around in a hurry and met her eyes. One of the knights tried to stop her, for the field was still dangerous. One of the knights tried to stop her, for the field was still dangerous. She ran to her Amond and saw only him before her. She grabbed his cheek and kissed him sweetly. Their lips finally merge in a long-awaited, tender kiss. In the comments, everyone was melting from this cute moment. They came out victorious, so Amond suggested to his lady that they head back. She gently stroked his cheek, praising him. It was a decisive moment, and Amelia thought of telling him how she felt. But this super sweet moment was left off the screen. The audience was not shown anything. They were disappointed. Meanwhile, the next shot was already when Jeannerette's army was returning. They were quietly walking or riding on horseback. Amond was one of the riders. Suddenly one of the knights asked him if he was the archer who had killed the 100. He smilingly praised Amond for his contribution to the battle, but he was interrupted by Roman. The knight acted as if he wasn't the one who had refused to believe it a few minutes ago. But even that enemy, Rosnita, at once recognized their achievement, that is, Amond's achievement. Amond said he wasn't the only one who did it. It all worked out because the captain and others were also fighting on the front lines. Roman was glad to hear that. He closed his eyes, talking about how happy his mercenaries would be when they found out. He spoke as if Amand wasn't one of them anymore. He wasn't really one of the mercenaries anymore. Roman wanted to say that he was free to choose who he wanted to be. Roman held out his hand, giving Amand a friendly pat on the shoulder. He continued his monologue. Thanks to Amand's contribution, they each earned enough to forget about work for 4 months. Roman, he really was a true friend. It's just too bad not everyone was able to develop his storyline to experience it for themselves. It would have been worth it. Who was Amand, and what did he do to the real Roman? In the comments, some still couldn't believe it was real. Soon it was dusk. Jeanneret's troops arrived at their family's castle. The beautiful Emilia emerged from the carriage that the knights and some mercenaries were escorting. It was the first time Amand had seen the castle from the inside. It was a marvelous sight. The castle seemed so majestic. Emilia beckoned the archer to follow, and he obediently followed. They came to a large carved wooden door. The lady gave orders to the guard to open it, presenting him with her guest of honor that would share a meal with her, letting them inside. And, first, Amand heard a man's voice. Then he saw him, Lord Jeanneret, Lady Emilia's father. The Lord walked over to the archer, speaking words of thanks and patting him on the shoulder. He gave orders to hurry up and carry the food. Fortunately for Amand, the Lord was not the kind of aristocrat who judged people by status. But he was still uneasy. A window appeared in front of him, announcing that he had successfully joined a meal with Emilia's family. They were seated on a large triple table. A servant brought water. Several buttons appeared in front of Amand. He was puzzled, pressed at random, and a minigame appeared in front of him. The comments reassured him. They were saying that developers are shoving games like this everywhere. Perhaps it was a reference to the fact that mercenaries don't know table manners. After all, even in real life you have to be prepared for anything. Various food was brought in, but various minigames popped up before Amand ate. This was the norm for Kingdom Age, but Amand was perplexed. Are all meetings with a future father-in-law like this? It was like he'd been drained. The meal continued. Grabbing a golden goblet of wine, the Lord asked what Amand thought about becoming one of the knights. So did everyone in the chat room. This was the first time they had seen such a twist in the story. Was it really possible to actually become a knight there? Amand was faced with a choice. Most of the quests in this game were for a free mercenary. If he strayed from the standard, it wouldn't be the same. It seemed to be the end of the game. Amand had assumed that he would reach the final faster if he chose Emilia, but not that fast. The chat room was once again divided into 2 camps. Some said it was best to choose to remain a mercenary, while others said it was best to choose to remain a knight. Amand had already decided what he was going to do next. That was all for today. He ended his broadcast. Sang-hyun sat in the pod. He didn't seem to be sweating much, if not fighting. Even though the stream was shorter than usual, he thought it turned out well. The timings were a bit too much, though. Kim Joo-hyuk ran up to him. According to him, the stream was fun as always. Even though Amand didn't fight this time, he showed Sang-hyun the news. The events from today's stream were already at the top. Brevity is the sister of talent. As if by the way, Kim Joo-hyuk also mentioned that he was contacted by Punk's representatives. They don't mind paying for the edits. They're giving the green light. Sang-hyun was ecstatic at the news. It was only natural since the offer was coming from them. But still, getting an official salary was a different matter. Tomorrow there was going to be a meeting and there would be a lot to shoot. So the guys decided to go to bed early. The next day, in the morning, the guys went to the Punk building. It was glassy and majestic. The news that Amand is now the official partner of Punk went out like hotcakes. He was now a top streamer. Punk was the largest distributor of games, both domestically and internationally. They take a leading position in the market without any defined strategy and steadily maintain their strong position. Recently, however, HyGame's performance in the market has been growing exponentially as well. Punk focused on advertising, marketing, exclusive headlines, programs, and strategies. And one of these programs is called Streamers Partners. The program involves co-op with popular streamers who are required to play games developed by Punk. In return, the streamer receives full support from this company. Some wondered if it was fatuous for a streamer with only 1,000 viewers. Others said Amand is already on the same level as streamer Bubblegum. Amand gained 1,000 viewers with Kingdom Age single-handedly and without tweaks. What would happen if he started playing more popular games? The stream hadn't started yet, but there was already a commotion in the chat room. They were eagerly waiting for their idol to appear on the screen. But Amin didn't show up. He should have started broadcasting a long time ago. Maybe something happened? Yoo Sang-hyun and Kim Joo-hyuk walked into one of Punk's offices. They were happily greeted by greeting them with handshake greetings. They were the long-awaited guests. Sitting at the table, Kim Joo-hyuk was talking to director Woo. Sang-hyun sat quietly, not knowing what to say to him. The audience wondered what game he was going to play next. He will be sold a contract on what to play from day one, so there are no options. A short moment later, Amand appeared on the screens of thousands of fans. It was an all-tube broadcast. Amand greeted all the viewers. With a beaming smile, Yoo Sang-hyun shared the news with viewers that he finally created an all-tube account. He also said he became the official partner of Punk. All thanks to the love and support of his subscribers. The enthusiastic fans were crazy happy for their idol. From today onwards, all his year's plays will be uploaded to this channel. All of his earlier edited videos will be remade and uploaded as well. And subscribers will be able to evaluate them at any time. Amand promised that he will continue to work hard and make more interesting content. He thanked his viewers for watching him. This news has become one of the most talked about in the gaming world. Amand is Punk's partner streamer. He's totally out of his league. Yoo Sang-hyun and Kim Joo-hyuk were sitting at Karachka Kanjong Cafe. They were clinking glasses of beer, celebrating such an occasion. It would be nice if Ji-ah could join their little celebration. Especially on such a beautiful day, Kim Joo-hyuk thought. Sang-hyun joked that it was hard to call it a celebration. They just ordered a beer at a cafe. And besides, he didn't admit that he was a success. It's about Seo Ji-ah. Joo-hyuk said she was amazing. How did she even manage to edit 3 full-length videos in 2 days? Sang-hyun replied that it was her hobby. She made the videos in her spare time before she even officially became their editor. And she didn't react when she was offered the job because she believed that jobs should be changed intelligently and with care. As they began to eat, suddenly Sang-hyun remembered that his friend had promised to tell him why he had run away from home. But he had time to ask a question before Joo-hyuk's hand pressed his head against the table. Joo-hyuk himself ducked down, trying to hide his head better, so he wouldn't be recognized. Who didn't understand anything, muttered that he could just say it if he didn't want to talk about it. Kim Joo-hyuk raised a finger to his lips as if to tell him to keep his voice down, or better yet, not to utter a word. Their former co-workers had just walked into the cafe. And then Joo-hyuk remembered that this cafe was not far from Asung, where they both used to work. He offered to quietly get out of there before anyone noticed them, but it was too late. To the guy's misfortune, Puck's manager walked up to their table, smiling nastily. He immediately started snickering, and when he noticed Sang-hyun as well, he began to poke fun at him. Kim Joo-hyuk put a cute smile on his face and asked how he was doing, but Manager Park was interested in something else. It was quite obvious what he was trying to accomplish. Knowing Manager Park's temper, he'd probably been gossiping non-stop since they'd left. Manager Park just wanted to hear that the guys never got a job. Joo-hyuk already knew ahead of time what he would think when he heard that he had become Sang-hyuk's manager. Park turned to Yoo Sang-hyun. When a man sees his boss, he should say hello. But Sang-hyun asked why all of a sudden he should say hello to him. Park turned white with anger. Joo-hyuk tried to calm his friend down. They weren't even buddies. Puck called him ignorant and an outcast who didn't understand how society worked. He wouldn't let up. It didn't matter what their relationship was. You have to be polite and say hello. It's an education. But then Sang-hyun couldn't help himself and suddenly started laughing at Manager Park. Puck talked so vehemently about parenting, and yet he walks up to someone else's table and unapologetically mind his own business. All the customers turned to their table, watching the growing quarrel. The cafe was even quieter. Sang-hyun continued, "It's not good manners to give morals when you don't follow them." Every word he said made Park even more angry. Manager Park rolled up his sleeves, while insulting Sang-hyun in passing. He got up from the table. Poor Kim Joo-hyuk didn't even know what to do. He tried his best to stop them, but no one listened to him. A man from Punk's office, Director Woo, walked into the cafe. He politely said hello to Sang-hyun. The principal started talking about that video he posted today. The number of views is staggering. Principal Punk was thrilled when he saw the numbers. Director Punk has an eye for detail. The CEO really wanted to have dinner with Yoo Sang-hyun, and Director Woo wanted to contact him about it. At this moment, Manager Punk seemed to have fallen from reality. Is it that huge punk company? And they want to have dinner with Sang-hyun? When everyone was already paying attention, people recognized Amand. There were even some from Asung Company that recognized him. A girl approached Sang-hyun, asking if he could leave her his autograph. Director Woo wanted one too, saying that he would show it to everyone later. Manager Park couldn't believe his ears. How could this idiot become a partner of such a company? Puck turned around, ordering his co-workers to leave with him. When the guy's former co-workers left the cafe, Kim Joo-hyuk addressed Director Woo with a big thank you. But the principal said there was no need for thanks. Some people were like that on their own. Sang-hyun bowed, expressing his gratitude. After all, the director had even lied to Park about the directors being amazed at the number of hits. The principal laughed wryly. He had been caught out. Perhaps he had exaggerated a little. People like Puck's manager only know how to yap. Also, they always get nervous when they hear big names. Director Woo was about to leave as he was saying goodbye to the guys. Before leaving, he spoke to Sang-hyun again. He told him to let him know when Sang-hyun was ready to have dinner with the CEO. The young man didn't understand what was going on. Was it the principal's jokes again? The man, laughing, said that it was pure truth. But the guys didn't really understand what was going on. The director said he only lied about the directors in the office. Everything else was pure truth. Didn't the guys see the number of views on their videos? In order to see any positive trend on your AllTube account, you'll have to upload at least 20 videos. It's a kind of investment in the future. So Sang-hyun didn't expect much from his channel. But who would have thought it would garner so many views in just one day? Even Bubblegum failed on AllTube. This is despite being one of the best on Treevee. Sang-hyun brushed his teeth while checking the views on the new videos. Each of them had almost 100,000 views. That's simply miraculous. He recalled the words of Acorn Jelly. Success on AllTube depends on the editor, so it is very important that he is good. The videos she made for the cut from an aspiring streamer playing a little-known game had incredible views. G's montages have greatly influenced the success of his channel. He was really lucky to have Seogia. Kim Joo-hyuk shouted from the next room. Lee's assistant texted him. He said Manager Park had been walking around with a pouty face all day. Manager Park thought that Sang-hyun had been dragged through by some big shot. Sang-hyun wondered how he came to that conclusion. He probably thought that because of Director Woo's words. It's easy for people like Park to fall for something like that. Kim Joo-hyuk rushed to the restroom, and Sang-hyun went out for a run to get some exercise. What a pleasure it was for him to stretch. After he quit his job, he stopped exercising, not to mention his addiction to chicken and beer. But even his retirement from the sport is no excuse for idleness. Sang-hyun completely withdrew into his thoughts. Enjoying the music and the fresh, he got a call from Kim Joo-hyuk. He angrily told Sang-hyun to check his inbox at least once in a while. In fact, the reason for his call was the big views. They are off the charts. No wonder the directors of Punk wanted to have dinner with him. Kim Joo-hyuk warned that he won't be at the dinner with the director, so Sang-hyun has to handle it himself. But there was something else he called for. It was about Seogia. He wanted to do something for her. After all, they owed her such success. I had to express my gratitude to her in some way. At that moment, Sang-hyun saw a girl in the park. She was also practicing. After about an hour, the guys found themselves in a cafe that had opened only a week ago. There were a lot of people, so it was lucky that they had come in the morning. Sang-hyun carried their order while Jia sat quietly at their table. It was normal to demand something more expensive than burgers for her labor. After an awkward conversation, the guys proceeded to eat. Sang-hyun stared at the way Seogia opened her mouth wide. There was a moment of awkward silence. Sang-hyun wasn't much of a talker himself, but he couldn't compete with Ji's taciturnity. Even when he tries to speak to her to break the awkward silence, the conversation always stalls. Jia must have had a hard time at her past job. At this point, she spoke up. She said she wasn't good at keeping a conversation going. It seemed that if she got drunk, it wouldn't work anyway. She can talk about work with no problem, but in normal life she has trouble just chatting with other people. She has often been told that she is strange. Sang-hyun suddenly asked about her past job. Of course, working for a company has its perks, but there are also many inconveniences. If you keep suppressing your feelings without saying a word, they will eventually come out. He didn't know what exactly had happened, but considering that he and Joo-hyuk had quit their office jobs too, He hoped she could tell him everything. Their breakfast continued in silence. But Ji-ah was already treating him differently. He really was so mature. Sang-hyun began his broadcast today. He once again announced that he is Punk's affiliate streamer, in case anyone hadn't heard. He then said on the stream that he would continue to play Kingdom Age. This was a relief to the viewers because they thought he was going to drop it. Almond immediately launched Kingdom Age. But subscribers had a feeling that Almond would pass Kingdom Age on this stream, and they truly believed that a new game was coming. And they've been waiting for this moment. Without further ado, Almond chose the path of a knight. He found himself in the courtyard of the castle of Jinret. It was winter, and everything was covered with snow. Almond sat down on his knees and the beautiful Amelia stood before her. She took the sword from his hands and began to perform the ritual. She was appointing him as her knight. This seemed to be the ending that had been talked about in the chat room. But suddenly Almond found himself indoors. It was already springtime. The chat room didn't understand what was going to happen next. First of all, Almond's clothes changed. It looked more luxurious than before. He must have become a full-fledged knight. But suddenly there was one last task in front of him. He had to pass the final test to become a knight. It was the final quest before the real Kingdom Age ending. It even made me a little sad. As Almond stood alone in the room, someone broke in on him in a panic. The young clerk grabbed his blonde hair in hysterics. Sir Almond was not yet dressed, and he was already late for his trial. Hearing the word trial, Almond turned white. What kind of test? So he was still not a knight? He quickly pulled himself together, coughing with a businesslike air. He tried to show calm. Today he must defend the honor of his knighthood. Explaining his task to him, the blonde quickly helped him into his armor. Amelia walked into Almond's room, which scared the hell out of the blonde. The lady took a step toward Almond, and their lips came together in a sweet kiss. It was sudden to Almond, but given all that had happened, this kind of relationship was only natural. She pulled away from his lips and looked into Almond's eyes. If something happened at the competition, their future together would be in doubt. But Amelia believed in him with all her heart, and Almond knew it well. They walked together to the final test, holding hands. Amelia encouraged him. They would show everyone that he was worthy of being a knight. They looked so beautiful together. There was a large arena near the castle where a huge number of people had gathered. They were all eager to see it. Looking at all this, a puzzled Almond thought, is this a gladiatorial combat-style trial by any chance? A count named Albert appeared in front of the couple. He reeked of arrogance from a mile away. Someone in the chat room joked that his face was begging for a brick. Albert began to speak. What was the Janret clan thinking, putting a man like Almond to the test? Arrogantly fixing his mustache, he reminded Almond that he was not of noble birth, so he still had to prove his abilities to them. Amelia intervened in the conversation. She corrected the count. Almond is constantly demonstrating his abilities. Sir Almond single-handedly carried out the takeover of Talorant Castle. And he even managed to defeat an incredible monster. An argument ensued between the lady and the count. The count did not understand how such absurd rumors could be trusted. There was no proof. The lady sneered back at him. He spoke as if he himself had the dignity of a knight in abundance. The words had hit the mark and made the earl furious. How dare she belittle such a great count in front of such a lowlife? Lady Janret took Almond away. He told her not to worry. He had agreed to the trial himself, so he was sure he could handle it. Amelia wasn't worried. She just didn't like being looked down upon by Almond. But from now on they would not dare anymore. Almond appeared in the arena and the crowd just exploded. They had heard of him, so they were chanting his name loudly. The archer asked the count about the conditions of victory. There was a saying that a true knight could stop a troll in its tracks. A huge troll appeared in the arena. The audience became alarmed. Isn't it dangerous? As far as people knew, Sir Almond used only a bow and arrow. How can you defeat a troll with only arrows? Trolls regenerate all the time. Was it possible to plug it with arrows until it was destroyed? The chat recommended that he switch to a melee weapon. You could hit him with something like an iron mace. What if it would help? The count cheered as he looked down on the scene. But he didn't smell like a knight himself. As soon as the troll appeared, he moved away. The troll did not attack. In that case, Almond struck a pose. He took aim and fired a single arrow. Amund turned around deftly and walked away from the arena stage, tossing his bow and catching it back. The troll fell from a single arrow. It was a perfect shot. Many of the spectators had forgotten about it. Everyone in the arena was in complete shock, not believing their eyes. Count Albert was most surprised and disbelieving. Everyone began to applaud the new knight who had proven his honor. Amund was the new hero, just an archer to the core. But Count Albert was not satisfied. He was sure that someone had poisoned the troll. He demanded an autopsy, but Amelia approached him. She declared the ordeal over, and the Count had to accept it. The Count stepped back. Well, now Amund's title as a true knight was confirmed. A beautiful melody played on the next stage. It was spring. Beautiful flowers were blooming near the castle. It was the wedding of Amund and Lady Jeanrette. As they embraced, they passed under an arch of knights' swords. The credits rolled in front of Amund. His first virtual reality game had come to an end. It only lasted for a week, but this game fundamentally changed Sang-hyun's life. Standing nowhere, Sang-hyun said goodbye to his character. Amund appeared in front of the audience. Kingdom Age was indeed over. It was time to move on to the next game. This news made the viewers very excited. They were guessing what kind of game he would play. He would be good with story games where characters with a bow are available. But in PvP shooters, it would not be equal either. Sang-hyun squeezed his hand. He would be lying if he said he wasn't nervous at all. Online games are different from story games. He will have to fight real people, not bots. No matter how much time he spends studying tutorials, there are tons of people who have had success with this or that game. So it won't be easy since he's only a beginner. If he is not careful, the image of genius that everyone expects from him could be destroyed. However, Amund cannot stand still simply because he is afraid of people being disappointed in him. Sang-hyun announced to his subscribers the next game he would be playing. It was a battle large game. Sang-hyun sipped a Coke while Kim Joo-hyuk flipped through forums on his laptop. It seems like the viewers who came to watch Kingdom Age will leave if Sang-hyun changes his game. A lot of streamers face this. It depends on the game. Sometimes streamers lose up to half of their audience. It turns out that the streamer takes a risk every time he changes the game. But it is beneficial in the long term. What kind of viewer would want to watch a streamer who doesn't develop? Even though Yu Sang-hyun said it, for him to lose 900 viewers is extremely painful. That's practically half of them. The number of subscribers had already dropped. But Sang-hyun tried to reassure himself that he was already prepared for this. He settled into the pod and turned on the stream. The first thing he had to do was download the game itself. Subscribers were surprised that he hadn't played it before. One viewer sent a donation with a tip. Battle Large is a very realistic game, so you better get ready. Battle Large is slightly more modern than Kingdom Age. Yu Sang-hyun wondered if it would be like real Olympics. It was too realistic. This is going to be fun, Sang-hyun thought. The game had set up. The entrance to Battle Large was done. Amund found himself on a helicopter. The pilot reported that they were already in position. He ordered them to prepare for landing. Seeing the altitude, Amund turned white with horror. Could a game really be that realistic? The pilot shouted from the left, ordering him to jump out of the helicopter now. But how could he jump from that height? When he watched the tutorials for this game, he didn't think it would be like this. The other players jumped down one by one. But Amund couldn't budge. The chat room tried to cheer him on. The longer it drags on, the worse it will get. Amund gathered his resolve. He took a decisive step into nowhere. Flying down, he suddenly realized even more strongly. This doesn't feel like a game at all. Those few seconds of terror lasted like an eternity. Finally, the parachute opened. Calmed Amund a little, but still, he felt like he was somehow falling too fast. A few seconds later, he landed roughly. Trying to slowly get up, he thought what was the action from the beginning of the game. And his face was all abrasions. His clothes all dusty from landing on the dusty terrain. Amund found himself in the middle of complete confusion. Here and their players were fighting with each other. Suddenly someone shouted, calling for an attack on Amund, who had landed so noobly with his parachute. Panicked, he found no better way out than to run away. He didn't have any weapons or skills. He spotted a two-story abandoned building and ran with all his might to get there. Quickly opening the iron door, he made his way inside. It was empty, and there was nowhere to hide. He ran down there without looking. but he hoped there was some kind of weapon in there. Casually turning to his left, he noticed a block bow and arrow lying on a wooden table. As a professional athlete, he'd had some fun with them. Who would have thought he'd find him here? He suddenly heard some sound. It was the other players climbing the outside stairs into the house. They were trying to get into the building through the second floor. Without thinking for long, Amand confidently grabbed his new bow and hid in a secluded spot. The door on the second floor opened, and other players came inside. They thought that the newcomer was hiding on the first floor. They readied their weapons, going downstairs and discussing the rookie and how he landed from the parachute. Thought the other players, this rookie is hiding somewhere, not even trying to recruit a weapon. At that moment, one of the 3 players fell before he could even make a peep. A 99 out of 100 kill. The other 2 turned around, not realizing what had just happened. Destroyed by an arrow to the head. One tried to trace the trajectory of the arrow's arrival, but at that moment an arrow flew into his head as well. 98 out of 100. The last one was left, but Amand had no time to think about it before the 3rd player simply ran away. Amand didn't know what to do. Should he run after him? The chat room was again divided into 2 camps. Some said it wasn't worth it because it was a game of survival. Others said that the 3rd must be destroyed. Amand decided to heed the advice of the second group. He couldn't run far anyway. At that moment, the same player appeared from the back. He pointed his bow at Amand, but before he knew it, Amand had fired his nimble arrow at his head. He fell to the floor. Triple kill, 92 out of 100. He must have thought that copying Amand would do him some good. Amand paused to read comments and interact with viewers. He asked if it was really that easy to stack enemies in Battle Large. They said it was very hard. He just had some bad players. Amand heard a strange sound. A message box appeared in front of him. The blue zone will shrink in 30 seconds.